The soil at the bottom of the deep pit had long been stained black and red as the fighting between dwarves and Skaven reached its most frenzied pitch. The sickening crunch of short axes cleaving bone, the sharp thwack of musket balls tearing through flesh, the high, keening wails of the Skaven, and the guttural roars of the dwarves all echoed off the steep walls, as if even the night above were thick with the stench of blood. Hundreds of storm terror rats finally punched through the piles of slave rat corpses and charged the dwarf shield wall, their iron plate armor clanking. Their short-handled war axes whistled as they came down, battering against the iron shields of the Longbeard warriors and sending jolts of force up through the men's arms. One storm terror rat jammed its axe into a gap in a shield and, with a vicious twist, actually tore the metal open. A musketeer's bullet killed it instantly, but the opening was enough. Clan rats surged through like a tide, stabbing wildly at the dwarves behind the shields with rusty short knives. "Hold! Do not let them through," the Longbeard captain roared, drawing his short musket and pressing the barrel to a clan rat's skull before firing. The muffled bang sent the rat's brains splattering across his armor, but more Skaven scrambled over the corpse, and soon two dwarves were dragged into the swarm. Their screams were cut short and swallowed by the chaos. On both flanks, the Argali riders had become mobile killing machines. The tall giant rams, armored with heavy barding, charged through the rats like tanks. Horn thrusts sent 2 or 3 slave rats flying, hooves smashed Skaven into bloody pulp. The riders' long spears were smeared dark with blood, some broken at their tips. They drew axes from their belts and hacked from above, each swing spraying crimson. One Argali's mount was entangled by several storm terror rats and its leg wounded. The rider dismounted without hesitation. His axe whirled in a silver blur, cutting down a ring of Skaven before more surged and overwhelmed him. "These bastards!" Lige bellowed. His reddish-brown beard was matted with black blood. His once neat braids were undone and filthy with dirt and rat fur. His short axe had been dulled, but he wielded it like a scythe, each blow splitting Skaven bodies in two. Earlier, 3 storm terror rats had ambushed him. He had snapped one's neck and crushed the other 2 with the haft of his axe. But his left arm had been slashed by a war axe, leaving a deep wound where bone showed through, blood steaming down between the plates of his armor and staining his trousers. He scanned the battlefield with bloodshot eyes. Dwarves surrounded by the swarm, the musketeer line beginning to crack. The Argali riders thinned. These were the elite of the Redbeard clan, his brothers whom he had led out, and they were being buried beneath claws and fangs. Fury burned behind his gaze. This was senseless slaughter. "Butchers, with me. Our target is that green-furred rat," Lige roared, fixing his stare on Greenhead's sis, called Hiss by some, who crouched on the far side of the fighting, directing forces behind a wall of storm terror rats. If the leader fell, the Skaven might collapse. "Kill!" 30 butchers answered in a single fanatic cry. Bare-chested and streaked with black blood and grime, the red runes tattooed across their flesh glowed faintly in the dim light. Their massive butcher's axes carved bloody arcs through the Skaven tide. Lige led the charge, battering aside a pouncing clan rat with his axe and kicking away another that tried to bite his ankle. Pain seared in his shoulder, but he felt only one thing: vengeance. One butcher was jumped by 8 storm terror rats. He let go of his axe, wrapped his thick arms around 2 attackers' heads, and with a twisting wrench, snapped both necks with a sick crack. He killed 2 more, stomped another, and then took 2 war axe blows to the chest. Black blood gushed, but he grinned wildly and hurled a dead rat into the enemy before collapsing. Lige's eyes went brighter still. He pressed forward, each swing burying his axe into any Skaven in his path. Slave rat or storm terror rat, all were split in 2. A storm terror rat lunged at his back with an upthrust aimed for his head. Lige twisted, kicked the knee, and the beast stumbled. He swung his axe up and cleaved its skull in 2. Black blood and brain matter splattered across him. Greenhead Sissis saw the butcher's charge, and white-knuckled fear ran through him. He had expected to grind the dwarves down with numbers. He had not expected them to be this mad, this savage, especially not Lige, who looked like a demon crawled from the earth. "Stop them! Stop them now!" Greenhead Sis shrieked, ordering nearby storm terror rats to charge. But the attackers hesitated at the sight of the butcher's ferocity, and the dwarves tore through them before they could reach Lige's line. Lige closed on Greenhead Sis. He could see grime on the rat's green fur, the wide fear in his eyes, the tremor in the hand clutching a short axe. Lige raised his weapon to finish him, both to avenge his dead and to seize glory for the Redbeard clan. Greenhead Sis's eyes went cold. He drew two short knives, slick with black oil, from behind his back. Their blades flashed. His teeth clicked. "Squeak! Want to kill me? First ask if my knives agree," he jeered, and then shot forward like an arrow. The Skaven's lithe agility let him dodge Lige's descent. Knives darted for the dwarf's throat and belly. Lige had not expected such speed. He brought his axe up to parry. The weapons rang with a sharp clang, and a spray of grit and gore hit Lige's face, stinging his skin. The two went at each other in a brutal exchange, the butcher's raw power against the Skaven leader's slippery speed. Lige's heavy swings cracked the ground. Greenhead Sis circled, aiming into gaps in the dwarf's armor and frequently grazing flesh, leaving bloody trails. Those fighting nearby avoided the pair instinctively, but some were struck in the crossfire. A slave rat swept by an axe wind was split in two. A clan rat trying to sneak in took a knife meant for Lige and collapsed in a twitching spatter of black blood. "Squeak, you red-bearded fool! We Skaven have many ways to end you." Greenhead Sis shrieked, and while dodging, drew a fistful of poisoned needles from his sash. As Lige's axe arced, he spit the needles toward the dwarf's eyes. Lige snapped his head aside. The poisoned pins grazed his cheekbone and lodged in the dirt, their tails still trembling. Lige roared, switching his downward chop into a sweeping blow that smashed into the Skaven's shoulder with a sickening crack. Greenhead Sis screamed as his shoulder blade shattered. His knives clattered to the earth. He rolled, dragging his injured arm and trying to crawl away. Lige moved to finish him, but three storm terror rats burst from the side, axes aimed at his back. He abandoned the pursuit and turned to meet them. With three ringing clangs, his axe met theirs, absorbing heavy blows. Pain flared in his wounded arm and fresh blood welled. Greenhead Sis scrambled behind his attackers, clutching his ruined shoulder. Terror and hatred burned in his eyes. Across the pit, the musketeers brought order to the chaos. Their leader, an old, wrinkled dwarf, spotted a raised mound 2 meters above the surrounding ground. It commanded a view of the entire hollow. "Everyone, up on that mound. Set your guns. 3 to a group, fire by turns," he barked, and was the first to clamber up, propping his musket on a rock. They heeded him. Musketeers hoisted one another up until the mound bristled with 3 rows of barrels. "First group, fire." The front line spat death. The bang-bang of gunfire rolled across the pit, lead tearing through the rat ranks. Slave rats dropped by the dozen. Black blood streamed into rivulets. Before the Skaven could regroup, the second group fired, and then the third, each volley mowing down another layer of attackers. The elevated musket formation became a nightmare the tide could not wash away. Many slave rats flattened themselves in terror, only to be pierced by bullets. Greenhead Sis watched his dwindling kin be slaughtered and felt his courage slip. He had no fast runners to cut a path for escape. He began to edge back, searching coldly for a chance to flee rather than to die. The shield wall of Longbeard warriors and disputants held like hammered iron. Wave after wave of Skaven crashed against it and failed to break through. Longbeards hacked into shield gaps with short axes. Disputants shattered armor and bones with heavy hammers. 2 dwarves were dragged into the swarm and overwhelmed, but comrades rushed to fill the breach. The wall endured. The Argali riders fared less well in the cramped pit. The giant rams could not launch proper charges. They could only dash at the edges of the Skaven formation, gore a few clan rats, then pull back before the swarm bogged them down. One rider, hungry for glory, pushed too deep. His mount's leg was cut and it fell. The rider went down under a pile of rats. His roar was brief. The butchers, naked torsos streaming black blood and shredded flesh with rune light flashing, fought like living furnaces in the center. Their axes took an enormous toll, but they also paid the highest price. Lige watched his brothers fall, so many faces he knew, red fury burning in him. He fought as if he were the only thing left between his clan and total massacre. Split, crush, avenge. As the fight ground on, many slave rats broke. Some tried to slink away. Some scrambled up the pit walls only to be cut down by storm vermin guarding the rear. Greenhead Cease, seeing his forces thin and the butchers coming ever closer, knew he would become another carcass if he stayed. He slunk further back, eyes calculating, begging for any gap in the slaughter that might let him slip away. The bottom of the pit was a terrible symphony, the roars of dwarves, the shrieks of Skaven, the boom of muskets, the clash of steel. Corpses stacked high, blood seeping through cracks, the air choking with iron and rot. Ligay stood amid a mound of rat bodies, his short axe planted in the earth, breathing hard. His eyes were bloodshot and cold as he scanned the battlefield. He knew the fight was not yet finished. He and his remaining brothers had to find a way out of this pit alive. 122, Dwarf and Mouse Part 4. The slaughter at the bottom of the pit went on. Blood, dark and cooling, ran ankle-deep and made a sickening squelch underfoot. Ligay's short axe had been reduced to a dull stub, its edge matted with rat fur and minced flesh. His armor was scored in dozens of places. Blood seeped from every gap and stained the ground beneath him. Still he stood like an iron pillar amid the piled Skaven corpses, crimson eyes locked on the rat not far away, the green-furred leader who had started this massacre. Hiss! Greenhead clutched his broken shoulder and crouched behind the last scattered storm vermin, heartbeat racing as he watched the blood-soaked dwarf. He knew that if the fight continued, Ligay would cut him in half. Lead from the musketeers' volley still thinned the Skaven ranks. The butchers hacked like maniacs, and the dwarf warriors behind the shield wall began to press forward steadily. The Skaven defenses were full of holes. Collapse was only a matter of time. "Squeak, clan rats! Watch the slave rats! No one runs!" Hiss shrieked, cold calculation in his eyes. He had to get away, and the clan rats and slave rats were the best bait. For a moment the clan rats were stunned. Then Hiss waved and led the remaining dozen storm vermin, sprinting for the narrow tunnel he'd had them dig into the pit wall. It was cramped, but enough to escape through. "The leader's running! The leader's running!" Some slave rats saw this and immediately panicked, shrieking as they tried to follow. The clan rats, ordered to hold their ground, had already lost the will to fight. They brandished short knives in a hollow gesture, unable to stop the fleeing throng. Ligay watched Hiss's fleeing shape, teeth grinding. He wanted to give chase, but the moment he took a step, a wave of dizziness hit him. The shoulder wound throbbed, and blood loss blurred his vision. His body had reached the limit. He staggered and braced against the corpse of a storm vermin to steady himself, eyes unwillingly tracking the tunnel where the green rat disappeared. "Sir, don't chase. Your wounds." A butcher hurried up to support him. The man's chest had a deep, bone-deep gash, but his grip on his axe was iron, worry written across his face. Ligay drew a ragged breath and forced himself calm. Chasing now would be reckless and could doom the rest. He looked at the butchers around him. Of 30, only fewer than 10 still stood, all wounded, and all watching him with a desperate resolve. "Reform the line. With me, we cut our way out," Ligay roared, voice raw but carrying hard authority. "They think they can run? Not on my watch." The butchers answered as one and charged with him into the heaving rat mass. By then, the Skaven had lost whatever will to fight they'd possessed. Word of their leader's flight spread like rot. Slave rats scattered in every direction. Clan rats fell into confusion and could not organize any effective defense. Ligay led the way, his axe biting through fur and bone. A clan rat lunged from the side. Ligay kicked him into the pit wall. He smashed against the rock, coughed black blood, and died. A slave rat clambered up his leg to bite. Ligay bent and swung, severing its head clean off. The butchers followed, axes swinging in brutal rhythm, carving a bloody lane through the enemy. On the ridge, the dwarf musketeers increased their rate of fire. "Keep shooting! Don't let them escape!" the old captain barked as the Skaven began to rout. Lead rained down like a storm. Each report was answered by a scream. Slave rats toppled in drifts of blood, bodies piling into little mountains. The shield wall of warrior and disputant rolled forward like a crushing machine. Longbeards hacked through the gaps, cleaving any clan rat who tried to stand. Disputants slammed heavy hammers into Skaven formations, sending swathes of them sprawling. Where the wall passed, rats were cut down or dropped to their knees in surrender, and even the supplicants did not escape death. The Argali riders found their place at last. The pit floor was narrow, but the Skaven were in utter disarray. The riders spurred their mounts, charging back and forth. Hooves smashed bones, mounts' bodies threw slave rats aside, and longswords harvested lives. The charge split the swarm into sections, preventing any coordinated escape. "Mercy! We surrender!" Some clan rats, unable to bear the slaughter, dropped their knives and sank to trembling knees, begging the dwarves for clemency. Ligay looked at the faces of his fallen brothers, the heavy infantry crushed, musketeers torn apart, mounted riders killed. Each face flashed through his mind. These men should have died in honorable battle, not butchered in a treacherous trap. He raised his axe again and brought it down on the nearest kneeling clan rat. "You mongrels don't deserve to talk about surrender," he spat. The blade fell. The clan rat's head rolled, and black blood spurted across the dirt. The remaining Skavens were broke utterly. They no longer fled or fought. They huddled, waiting for death. The dwarves showed no mercy. Axes, longswords, and muskets continued to reap lives until the screams and the clash of steel faded into a one-sided slaughter. Ligay stood amid the piled corpses, leaning on his axe, face carved into a mask. His wounds still bled, and his strength was spent, but his gaze was fixed on the tunnel mouth where Hiss had escaped. The green-furred rat would slip away today, but Ligay vowed he would be found eventually, avenged for fallen brothers, and to restore the honor of the Redbeard clan. A butcher came to him and handed over a flask of black mushroom spirits. Ligay took it, pulled the stopper, and drank deep. The spicy liquor burned down his throat, dulling some of the pain and clearing the fog in his head. He looked around at the survivors, 500 at the start, now fewer than 300, all wounded yet still standing, faces worn with exhaustion and hard resolve. "Count the living, tend the wounded, gather weapons," he said hoarsely, setting the flask down. "We don't leave yet. Hold this pit. Hiss may come back to ambush us." They set to it with grim efficiency. Men counted bodies and prepared on-site burials. Others scrounged Skaven arms to replace ruined gear. Some hunted for fresh water to clean wounds. The slaughter dwindled, leaving behind the heavy scent of blood and the slow, tired movements of the dwarves. Late sunlight slanted through cracks in the pit entrance, turning the dark red blood a mournful gold. Ligay leaned against the stone and watched it all with a heavy heart. The sudden battle had cost them dearly and forced the plan against the orc walls to a halt. But this was only the beginning. The road ahead would still be full of thorns, orcs to face and Skaven revenge to guard against. The dangers had only just begun. 123. Green-skinned man saves dwarf. The coppery smell of blood still clung to the bottom of the deep pit, but the dwarves were already at work, methodically clearing the battlefield. The surviving Longbeard warriors and disputants carefully moved aside the ratmen's bodies and gathered the fallen together. Some dwarves' hands were frozen as if still gripping axes, some armor ripped to tatters by sharp claws, others with teeth clenched as though fighting to the last. "Clean our brothers' armor and lay their weapons beside them," Ligay said hoarsely as he knelt by a dwarf warrior, gently closing the warrior's wide-open eyes. "Dwarves abandon no one. Even in death, we bring them home with honor." The butchers set down their blood-streaked axes and wiped armor with ritual care. The musketeers collected scattered muskets and lid balls, and others counted the ratmen, over 1,000 corpses, piled like a small mountain in the pit, yet the number did little to salve the dwarves' losses. Ligay rose and stared at the more than 20 dwarf bodies before him. Faces that had once fought at his side now lay cold, and his chest ached as though struck with a hammer. He wiped the blood from the corner of his eye and looked up at the rim of the pit. The wall rose steep and smooth for over 20 meters, streaked with excavation marks. There was nowhere to climb. Getting out would be harder than climbing into the sky. "Sir, how do we get up?" a long-bearded warrior asked, worry creasing his face. "Our brothers are wounded and the giant rams can't climb. If we stay here and the ratmen come back to ambush us, we're done for." Ligay said nothing. He lifted his gaze to the sky above the pit, anxiety coiling in his gut. Would they be trapped here among carcasses and blood? Then, from the rim of the pit came the clatter of hemp against stone. Instantly alert, the dwarves raised their weapons and peered upward. Dozens of thick hemp ropes dangled down the pit wall. Torches appeared over the edge, revealing a group of orcs, bare-chested, green-skinned, their muscles shining in the torchlight, ropes in hand, impatience written across their faces. "Oi, dwarves down there! Climb up, quick!" boomed a voice from the lip of the pit. Glenn stood at the edge, his red hair aflash in the firelight, his squig restless beneath him. Behind him were over 80 orc big guys, each armed with iron axes and leather armor. Ligay stood stunned. The orcs were going to rescue them? To Ligay, orcs were simple thugs who lived for fighting and plunder. Why would they offer help? Was it a trap? Would the orcs fall on them as soon as they reached the rim? "Sir, be careful," the butcher chieftain hissed, tightening his grip on his great axe. "Orcs don't do charity. They might be luring us up to kill us." Ligay watched Glenn. The orc captain frowned and kicked an orc beside him. "Tie the ropes properly now. If the dwarves fall, the boss'll chew me out," he muttered. The impatience in his voice sounded genuine. Liga looked again at the wounded around him. Broken arms, legs hacked by Ratman battle axes, too weak to climb. The giant rams were injured too and could not be made to scale the pit. If they refused help, they might well be stranded and die. "Trust them this once," Liga said at last, voice low. "But stay alert. Once we're up, get ready for a fight." The dwarves nodded and moved to the ropes. The musketeers lashed injured comrades to harnesses and sent them up first. The Longbeards and disputants climbed hand over hand, weapons clutched, ready for anything. The giant rams were secured with ropes and hauled up by a dozen hands. More than beasts, they were comrades. Ligay went last, gripping the rope with measured caution, watching the orcs at the rim. When his hand finally found solid ground, several dwarves seized it and pulled him up. He drew his short axe the moment his boots hit the earth, eyes scanning the orcs. Instead of closing ranks to strike, the orcs stepped back and left a wide buffer. Glenn stood at the front of the group, arms folded, impatience plain on his face. "Boss told me to pull you out. Now get moving. Don't hang about and be a nuisance." Ligay blinked. The orcs' eyes were fierce, but they showed no appetite for fighting. They really were withdrawing. Who was this greenskin boss to order orcs to rescue enemies? "Who's your boss? Why save us?" Ligay asked, bewildered. Glenn rolled his eyes. "Our boss is Stone. He saved you because he says you're still useful for now. Don't ask so many questions. Move. If you take too long, I might just chop you." With that, Glenn waved and led the orcs away, vanishing into the forest night with the torches bobbing. Only loose ropes and a group of bewildered dwarves remained. Ligay watched them go, then turned to his surviving comrades, suspicion coiling beneath his resolve. Stone, he'd never heard that name. To command orcs into saving their enemies made him no ordinary greenskin leader. "Sir, what now?" a Longbeard asked. Ligay drew a breath, tamping down his doubts. "First, we find a safe place to rest, tend wounds, and bury our dead. As for those orcs..." He hesitated, his eyes dark with thought. "We won't provoke them for now, but we stay on guard. You never know what's in an orc's head. One day they help, the next they might cut your throat." The dwarves agreed and set about packing, bearing the bodies of their fallen deeper into the forest. Torchlight flickered across tired, determined faces. What had begun as a surprise attack on orcs had turned into an inexplicable plunge into a trap-filled pit, a brutal fight with Ratman, and most oddly of all, rescue by those very orcs. By the Dwarf King, it was all too strange. Farther into the woods, Glenn rode his squig hard toward Ironhold, irritation writ on his face. If Stone hadn't ordered it, he would never have bothered to save the dwarves. Still, he remembered Stone's words. "Keep the dwarves, they're useful for now," and smothered his anger. Behind them, the pit settled back into silence, ropes strewn about, and Ratman corpses lying where the blood had dried, as if the bloody struggle and daring rescue had been a fleeting dream. Deep in the Yadu caves, the air of Stone's boss's house was heavy with sweat. On the second-floor clearing, Stone worked out bare-chested. His green muscles gleamed with oil under the torchlight. Each push-up made the stone floor tremble a little. He had been at it for nearly an hour, veins bulging, sweat running down his cheeks and forming a small puddle on the rock, yet his rhythm never faltered. 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups, 1,000 squats, his unchanging routine since he transmigrated, and the foundation of how he kept his place among the greenskins. Who? Finishing the last push-up, Stone pushed himself up abruptly and panted. He grabbed an animal hide towel, wiped himself off, and though his body was hot and tired, his eyes shone with a restless excitement. Skarsnik had just brought news of a scrap between the dwarves and the Skaven. 500 high mountain dwarves had launched a surprise attack, but had fallen into deep pits laid by Skaven tunnel traps. In the end, Glenn had had to lead orc boys in to pull them out. Gezik's dwarves. Stone leaned back against the wall and smirked. He could guess the dwarves' motive without being told. They were after control of the Howling Trail. The Blackrock tribe had been monopolizing the trade route and choking off the dwarves' income. Of course, the dwarves wouldn't stand idle. What amused him was that they'd only sent 500 troops and expected to storm Ironhold's blue brick walls, 25 meters high. That was underestimating the Blackrock tribe. But the pits the Skaven had left were a real danger. Tens of meters across and hundreds deep, they could still harbor Skaven or be exploited by other forces. Stone stroked his chin. "I'll have to send the Pyging sappers to fill them in," he decided. "While they're at it, they'll probe the tunnels so the Skaven don't make trouble again." Even better, the scuffle gave the boys an excuse to fight. Greenskins cooped up too long get restless. Clearing out Skaven and guarding against dwarves would give them a chance to unleash themselves. Violence and chaos were in their nature. Only through blood and fire could the tribe grow stronger. There was a knock on the door downstairs, and Big Smart's voice called up, "Boss, done exercising. I've got something to tell you." "Come up," Stone called. He pulled on his coarse cloth, and Big Smart pushed open the door with a ledger of animal hide in hand. He was still the same shrewd-eyed goblin in a linen robe, leaning on a staff inlaid with copper. He bowed respectfully. "Boss, this is this month's mushroom field yield and the caravan's trade records. Please look." Stone flipped through the ledger. The crooked greenskin script recorded a 30% increase in mushroom production, 200 gold coins earned from selling black mushroom spirits to Katushir, and 50 iron axes exchanged for ore sold to Gezik's dwarves. The accounts were clear and tidy. "Well done." Stone put the ledger on the stone table. "Sit. Don't just stand there. I wanted to talk to you." Big Smart hesitated, then sat on a nearby stone stool. He had served Stone for a long time. This was the first time the chieftain had asked for a chat, and the goblin was a little nervous. "How long have you been with me?" Stone asked casually. "Almost 2 years, boss," Big Smart answered after a moment. "I joined when you unified the Howling Forest, right after you finished with Katushir." 2 years, Stone said, sighing. "You've worked hard. The tribe's accounts, supplies, personnel. You handled it all. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are." Big Smart waved his hand. Flattered. "Boss, you're too kind. It's what I should do. My fortune to follow you." Stone's expression softened and then became curious. "I've always wondered about your past. You're not like ordinary goblin shamans. You know bookkeeping. You run things. You know the outside world. You must have followed someone powerful before." Big Smart stiffened. His staff trembled. Nostalgia, sorrow, a touch of regret passed across his face. He hesitated, then spoke in a hoarse voice. "Since you asked, I won't hide it. I used to follow a great greenskin warlord, Bonebreaker. He was one of the strongest chieftains in the southern evil lands." The name stirred something in Stone. He'd seen it in the system database. Bonebreaker had commanded tens of thousands of greenskins, swept through the southern evil lands, fought vampires in the east and high elves in the north, and had even pushed to the borders of the Imperium. But he fell in a decisive battle against the Imperial army, and his tribe broke apart. "That's right, Lord Bonebreaker," Big Smart said, eyes distant. "I was his chief shaman, rituals, divination, managing supplies. He trusted me and discussed many things with me. Back then we were glorious. Tens of thousands followed him. Wherever he went, that was our territory. Humans, dwarves, elves, none could withstand us." His voice dropped, but Bonebreaker became too greedy. He tried to take the human fortress Goldenhold. The fortress was stout, and the humans sent many soldiers and mages. We fought for 3 months and suffered terrible losses. In the final battle, a human paladin named Natasha killed Lord Bonebreaker. A shadow crossed Big Smart's face, and his eyes reddened. After he died, the tribe scattered. Some joined other warlords, some were captured, others roamed the world. I lost heart and traveled, wanting to see how big the world was and to find a new leader who could carry on Bonebreaker's will. He looked at Stone with fierce determination. Then I met you. In you I saw both the direct fury of a war boss and the cunning of a leader. Someone who doesn't just loot and fight, but who builds walls, organizes production, and unites greenskins to become stronger. I knew you were the one, so I followed. Stone listened in silence, moved. He hadn't known Big Smart had such a past, and he didn't expect his goblin shaman to hold him in such regard. The responsibility pressed heavier on him now. He had to make the Blackrock tribe strong and lead these greenskins to their place in a harsh world. Thank you, Big Smart. Stone stood, came over, and solemnly patted the shaman's shoulder. Big Smart stood too, nearly speechless with excitement. Stone's eyes burned with resolve. What Bonebreaker couldn't finish, I will. I'll raise the greatest whack in the old world, plant the Blackrock banner everywhere, and make the name Greenskin Warlord Stone thunder across the lands. Follow me and you'll have fights and feasts, and you'll be the strongest. Whack! Big Smart cried, staff raised high, voice fanatical. Around them, the rest of the camp stirred with anticipation. Stone knew the words were not empty. With loyal lieutenants like Glenn, Bonetree, Skarsnick, and Scarface, a growing greenskin army, and Ironhold's indestructible blue brick walls, he had the means and the confidence to try. Outside the caves, night deepened, but the Yadu complex hummed with life. Orc boys practiced with axes on the training ground, goblins patrolled the mushroom fields, and the Peejing sappers readied tools to fill the pit at dawn. Stone looked over it all and felt secure. The skirmish started by the dwarves and stirred up by the Skaven was only a small episode in the Blackrock tribe's rise. Greater trials were coming: the human alliance, the dwarves' revenge, the Skaven's covetousness, the threat of chaos. But Stone was not afraid. For greenskins, fighting was life, and wah was faith. 125, Dwarf Glory. Inside Gezhik Federation's mountain city-state, the clang of hammer on anvil and the din of taverns still filled the streets, but they could not dispel the grave hush in the Central Council castle. 5 stone chairs, each carved with a clan crest, were set in a circle. The granite floor reflected the orange glow of the wall fires, throwing the elders' long shadows across the hall. Tension hung thick in the air. Hei of the Oakwood clan broke the silence first. His light green beard twitched with anger as his wooden staff struck the floor with a dull thud. Hisui, you've gone too far. The 5-member council hadn't even decided, and you sent the Redbeard clan's elites to attack the greenskins on your own. This isn't just a provocation to the council, it's an insult to every clan leader here. Wailu of the Conestone clan chimed in at once, stone dust clinging to his dark beard like powder. Hei's right. At the last council, we agreed to send emissaries first to assess the Blackrock tribe's true strength, and yet you acted alone. 500 elites went out because of your haste, and were ambushed by tunneling Skaven. Over a dozen died. Do you know how many years it takes the Federation to train a single warrior? Wailu's voice rose as he jabbed a finger at Hisui. Those warriors should have been guarding the mines, forging weapons, fighting for Gezhik's honor, yet they died in a senseless trap. Do you think you can answer to their families, to the ancestors of the Redbeard clan? Hisui sat silent, his reddish-brown beard hanging heavy on his chest. He lowered his head and gripped a copper pipe until his knuckles blanched. He knew he had broken the council's rule. Any action against the Blackrock tribe required unanimous consent. But he had been unable to stomach the greenskins occupying the trade route and had privately dispatched Li Gay to lead the expedition. The mission had failed. They had not taken the Howling Trail, and more than a dozen elite warriors had fallen. There was no excuse. Kraz of the High Axe clan sat at the head of the table, his silver-white beard braided into 3 strands, small iron axes bound at the ends. He had watched in silence, his gaze complex with disappointment, regret, and a trace of understanding. As the eldest clan leader in Gezhik, he knew Heisui's temper and the Redbeard clan's obsession with trade, but the council's rules had been broken. Dang of the Stone Lake clan cradled a stone cup, his gray beard rippling like calm water. He rubbed the rim absent-mindedly, replaying Lige's intelligence in his mind. 25-meter-high green brick walls, a moat, bastions, and tunneling Skaven. The Blackrock tribe was far more organized and dangerous than they had believed. While Hisui's actions had been reckless, they had also forced the council to see a new reality. The Greenskins were no longer a scattered rabble. Jezik had to reassess its enemy. "I will answer for the fallen," Hisui finally said, voice raw but steady. "For each bereaved family, I will personally present a medal of glory, bronze, cast from battle-axe molds and engraved with the name and deeds of the fallen. For compensation, the Redbeard clan will pay 3 times the usual sum, so their families will be cared for." He looked each leader in the face, unbowed. "I admit this operation failed, and I will bear all responsibility. If the council wishes to punish me, I accept. If the Redbeard clan must be penalized, I accept that too. But I will not confess that I was wrong." "Not confess wrong?" Wailu sprang up, his fist slamming the stone with a sound like a hammer blow. "You lost over a dozen brothers, and you still won't admit fault? Do you want to fight?" Hisui rose as well, his beard bristling. "Dwarves are never cowards or timid. The Greenskins have seized our trade routes and stolen our livelihood, yet here we stand arguing whether to investigate or act. Must we wait until their walls are at Gezik's gates before we lift our axes?" His voice thundered through the hall. "Dwarves can lose. They can die charging, and they can die in defense, but they cannot be afraid. We cannot shrink back simply because an enemy is strong. I sent Ligay not because I wanted rash glory, but because I refused to let Gezik's sons hang their heads before Greenskins." "I have no regrets," Hisui said finally, eyes hard. "If I had to do it again, I would. If reclaiming the Howling Trail and making the Greenskins feel Gezik's might costs 10 more or 100 more, I accept it." Silence fell. Hiei and Wailu opened their mouths and could not find the words to answer. Though born of impulse, Hisui's words struck at the core of dwarf belief. Honor and courage outweigh the value of life. Kraz exhaled and spoke at last. "Hisui, I understand your anger," he said, "but the council's rules must stand. For the losses, the Redbeard clan will bear 70% of the responsibility. Leadership of the Howling Trail trade caravan will be temporarily withdrawn from the Redbeard clan and handed to the Oakwood clan." He looked around the circle. "Dang, continue to send intelligence teams to probe the Blackrock tribe. Wailu, strengthen the city-state's defenses to prevent Skaven ambushes. Hiei, work on rerouting trade temporarily to bypass the Howling Trail. At the next council, we will decide how best to deal with the Greenskins." The leaders nodded, and Hisui made no objection. He knew it was the lightest sentence the council could impose. When the meeting broke up, he lingered alone in the hall, staring at the Redbeard banner and feeling a mix of pride and sorrow. He went to the brazier, lit his pipe, and let the sharp smoke ease the weight in his chest for a moment. He thought of the lists Ligay had brought back, of the grieving faces that would follow, and his heart felt like it had been struck by a heavy hammer. Yet he felt no regret. As he had said, dwarves could lose, but they must not be afraid. If the cause was Gezik's honor and the reclaiming of dwarf trade, every sacrifice was worth it. Hisui snuffed his pipe and left the hall. Outside, the sky had grown dark. The blacksmith's fires still burned bright, and faint laughter from the taverns drifted through the mountain air. 126, squeak deep beneath the mountains of the Edgeworld, a cavern 1,000 meters deep reeked of rot. Luminous moss clung to the damp rock walls, its pale green glow washing over a never-ending tide of ratmen. Slave rats hunched under wicker baskets of ore, scurrying through narrow tunnels as overseers' whips laced their backs and left bloody welts. Clan rats with short knives paced every entrance, watching each passerby with sharpened vigilance. In the heart of the cavern, storm vermin stood in rigid formation, their heavy iron plate armor catching the sickly light like a row of silent killing machines. At the cavern's deepest point, a palace of bone and stone rose abruptly. Pillars made from the leg bones of giant beasts bore emeralds set into their tops. Dried ratman corpses were tacked to the walls as grotesque ornamentation. On a central dais stood an obsidian statue of the great horned rat, half a man's height. The rat's spiraled horns carved in grotesque detail, its eyes 2 polished rubies, claws razor sharp. Twisted Skaven runes crawled around the base and breathed an unsettling aura. On a throne of bone before the statue sat clan leader Longtail of the Jia clan. He stood a head taller than the average storm vermin. His long silver-gray tail swung behind him, its bony tip glinting. His armor was a patchwork of chaos beast hide and wrought iron, the plates etched with dense wards. He gripped a scepter topped with a ratman's skull, and his scarlet eyes burned with malice as he stared down at Greenhead Sis, known as Hiss, who knelt before the dice. "Speak," Longtail rasped, his voice like rusted iron scraping. "You led out 1,000 ratmen, lost most of our storm vermin elite, and returned with not a single worthwhile haul. What use are you to me now?" Hiss trembled on the cold stone, fingers digging into gravel, his green fur matted with mud and blood from the pit. He dared not meet the clan leader's gaze. His voice came out a frightened whisper. "Clan leader, the op wasn't without result. We discussed cutting the surplus slave rats before we set out. This time, we took care of those useless slave rats. The tribe's food needs will drop by 30%. "Took care of," Longtail sneered, tapping the floor with his scepter. The statue seemed to shiver. "You fed 1,000 ratmen to the dwarves and call that taking care of them? Sounds to me like you fed your own brain to those idiots." Hiss shuddered and kowtowed, choking on tears. "Mercy, clan leader, I did find something. We didn't find Katushir, but we found a greenskin tribe. They're near the Howling Trail, in the Howling Forest. They've even built a blue brick city wall over 20 meters high. If the dwarves hadn't ambushed us, we would have learned more about them." A greenskin tribe. Longtail's interest flickered. He tapped the arm of his throne with the scepter's bone spike. "Greenskins are bloodthirsty brutes. What's there to investigate?" "You don't understand." Hiss craned his neck up, greed flashing in his eyes. "Greenskins who can raise a blue brick wall that tall must be rich. Think of the bricks and the labor. Ordinary tribes can't even manage a wooden palisade, yet these built a city wall. They must be hiding iron and grain, maybe even treasures taken from humans or dwarves." He hesitated, remembering the heavy armor he'd seen on the dwarves, on Ligue, and swallowed. "We also ran into a dwarf unit. Those dwarves were wearing top-quality iron armor and had firearms, clearly from Gajik. If the dwarves came personally, that proves the greenskins have something the dwarves want. This tribe is not to be dismissed." Longtail fell silent, his gaze fixed on the obsidian rat. His hand idly stroked the skull atop his scepter. He knew well that iron and grain were the lifeblood of Skaven advancement. If this greenskin tribe were truly wealthy, it could elevate the Jia clan alone. Even control of the Howling Trail trade route would bring lucrative tribute from human and dwarf caravans. A greedy light crept into his eyes. A heavy footstep echoed from the palace side door. "Father, let me go." A tall storm vermin strode in, broader and more imposing even than the clan leader. He wore a set of gleaming, refined iron plates, serrated with carved edges. Twin poisoned short axes hung at his belt. A dark green gem was inlaid on his shoulder pauldron. He was Longtail's son and the clan's finest warrior, Yuka. Yuka came to the dais, dropped to one knee, and spoke with raw confidence. "Father, let me take the force to scout that greenskin tribe. If they truly have treasure, I will slaughter the lot and bring it back. If they're bluffing, I will tear down their walls, chop off their heads, and offer them to the great horned rat." Longtail regarded his son with a trace of satisfaction. Yuka was a formidable fighter and meticulous, far more dependable than Hiss, that opportunistic fool. He pointed his scepter at Hiss. "Since you discovered the tribe, you will go with the Yuka. Cross us, botch this, and I will throw you into the rat pit to be gnawed until nothing remains but bones." Hiss kowtowed frantically. "Thank you, clan leader. Thank you, Lord Yuka. I will guide the way faithfully. I will not play any tricks." Yuka's eyes glinted with disdain as he looked at the green-furred rat, but he had no quarrel. The guide would save time and trouble. He rose and bowed to his father. "I'll muster the troops and march at first light." "Go," Longtail said with a dismissive wave, sinking back into his bone throne. His gaze returned to the great horned rat statue. "First, scout their strength and defenses. Do not act rashly. If they prove powerful, report back so we can plan." "I understand." Yuka turned and left. Hiss hurried after him. Silence fell over the throne room, broken only by Longtail's breathing and the faint tap of his scepter on stone. He stared at the obsidian rat, visions of power and conquest filling his mind. Control of the Howling Trail, domination of rival clans, the Jia name spread through the underworld. Outside the palace, Yuka gathered his force. He chose 200 elite storm vermin, each in newly forged iron plate and carrying poisoned short axes, 500 battle-hardened clan rats, armed with sharp knives and dwarven crossbows, and 1,000 slave rats, fodder for the assault and labor for the march. Hiss trailed them, watching the elite troops with a knot of conflicting feelings. He longed to gain favor and prove himself, yet feared meeting dwarves like Ligay again, and worried that a greenskin tribe capable of such masonry might be far more dangerous than they imagined. He had no choice. He would go with Yuka toward the Howling Forest. What waited there would be the true might of the Blackrock tribe. Night deepened as the sounds of scurrying feet, snarls, and clanging weapons wove through the underground caverns beneath the Edge-World Mountains. 127. Green Warehouse. The night in the Howling Forest was as thick as ink. Under the moon, the blue brick walls of Ironhold picked up a cold, hard gleam. The greenskin guards on the ramparts had already changed shifts, only scattered torchlight flickered between the battlements. The air smelled of mushroom wine and the metallic tang of iron. No one noticed that, in a corner of the warehouse floor, a loose blue brick was slowly shifting outward, dirt crumbling away to reveal a narrow hole just large enough for a ratman to squeeze through. Several gaunt slave rats poked heads out of the gap, eyes bright with alertness, noses twitching as they sampled the air. Only after they were sure there was no scent of greenskins did they slide cautiously out, nimbly pushing aside weeds to widen the entrance for those behind them. A tall figure bent and emerged next. It was Ayuka. He had shed his heavy, polished iron armor for light leather, but there was still something predatory about him. His gray fur shimmered coldly in the moonlight. He held a poisoned dagger and watched with hawk-sharp eyes. A few slave rats froze by the hole. "Useless wretches, hurry up," Yuka hissed, and kicked one of the smaller slaves blocking the way. These skinny slave rats had been chosen by him for their size and speed, perfect for slipping in and scouting. He'd come to verify Hiss's claim. Was this greenskin tribe truly as wealthy as rumored, and worth mounting a full-scale assault? When they crawled out, Yuka finally understood why the slaves had stalled. The building before them was far more impressive than he had imagined. It was not a crude wooden shed or a rough stone storehouse, but a solid structure of blue bricks. Smooth walls, mortar set like stone, clearly far more fire and weather resistant than the ordinary timber barns of the borderlands. The warehouse door was a slab of heavy elm fastened with an iron lock, but the greenskins had carelessly propped it open against the wall, clearly not worrying much about thieves. Yuka waved, and the slave rats pushed the door gently. The hinge gave a faint creak that sounded disproportionately loud in the silent night. Yuka held his breath, tightened his grip on the dagger, and only when he was sure there were no patrols nearby did he slip inside. The warehouse took his breath away. It was vast enough for hundreds of ratmen. Wooden racks ran in orderly rows, heaped with all manner of goods. Mushroom lamps, oil the greenskins refined from fungi, like kerosene, cast a warm glow over the treasure before him. On the shelves nearest the entrance lay bundles of clean white human linen, soft and clearly high quality, likely transported from Katushir or Prince Patton's fiefdom. Wooden crates held golden wheat, plump grains that still smelled faintly of harvest. Massive ceramic jars were filled with dark mushroom spirits and pale green mushroom beer. The liquids were clear, and the aroma made one long to drink. Baskets held fresh vegetables, carrots, potatoes, cabbages, foods rarely seen in underground caves. There was even a small basket of bright red strawberries, clearly bought from a human caravan. Deeper in, the goods grew more valuable. Piles of iron glinted coldly in a corner, high-grade metal, likely traded from the Gezhik dwarves. Dozens of iron axes, spears, and short swords hung from a rack. Blades were sharp, spear tips cruelly bright. Dwarven tools, iron pots and ladles, stone grinders, copper kettles were finely made, far superior to the rusty junk common in the Jia clan. What made Yuka's breath catch, however, were the items at the very back of the shelves. A piece of elven runic armor pulsed with a faint blue light. The plates were thin and hard, etched with complex runes that promised magical protection. Bolts of brightly colored elven cloth embroidered with exquisite patterns felt as fine as silk. An elven shortbow lay on a shelf, its wood of an unknown grain and its string of silver-white sinew, and several gem-inlaid arrows hung nearby. Hiss, Yuka breathed, greed flashing in his eyes. He had never seen so many valuables in one place: human cloth and grain, dwarven iron and tools, elven magic and arms. Taking a single piece back to his clan would be enough to bring him honors. An entire warehouse could make his name legendary. Hiss had not lied. A greenskin tribe able to build a blue brick warehouse and stock it with goods from 3 races was a powerhouse. Capture this place, and the Jaya clan could end its food shortages, rearm, and possibly unite the nearby Ratmen clans to become the dominant force in the borderland foothills. He forced himself to calm. This was the enemy's heart. Patrols surely circled the place, and if they were discovered now, none of them would get away. The priority was to confirm the intelligence and return to report to his father, the clan leader, so the clan could bring its main force before the greenskins drew everything away. "Don't move," he ordered in a low voice, sweeping his gaze over the slave rats. The little creatures stared hungrily at the shelves, throats gurgling with hunger. Afraid they might lose control, he added, "Wait until we come back with the army, and all this will be ours. If anyone dares to sneak a bite now, I'll feed him to the greenskins' squig." The slave rats bowed their heads in terror, no longer daring to glance at the food. Satisfied, Yuka committed every detail, the location and amount of goods, to memory, then turned back toward the hole. The slave rats scrambled after him and slipped into the tunnel. Yuka was last to leave. Once inside, he told them to replace the loose brick and cover the entrance with dirt and weeds so the greenskins wouldn't notice. Satisfied the escape was clean, he led the rapid retreat, his heart already racing with the glory that would follow, seizing the greenskin tribe, claiming the wealth, and rising as the new star of the Jia clan. He did not notice, as he turned, that one tiny slave rat had not followed. It had hidden behind the shelves, small as a scrap of cloth, its leather armor ragged and belly rumbling. The sight of golden wheat, fresh vegetables, and sweet strawberries had been more than the creature could bear. When the footsteps in the warehouse faded away, it stuck its head out, eyes shining with greed. It darted to a crate of wheat, scooped a handful, and shoved the grains into its mouth. The wheat smelled of summer. As it chewed, it gave a satisfied, high-pitched squeak. A few mouthfuls later, it grabbed a strawberry, swallowed it whole, and let the sweet juice burst across its tongue. Fear and Yuka's threats melted away with each bite. It snatched more wheat, gnawed a potato, licked beer from the rim of a jar. Its appetite was ravenous. Soon its belly was round and bloated. The mushroom lamps dimmed as the night deepened, their flicker painting the slave rat's contented face. In the tunnel, Yuka and the others fled, minds full of plans for the future, unaware that the smallest, most overlooked slave remained behind, gorging on a fortune he could never understand. The first ray of morning pierced the canopy of the howling forest and slashed across the blue brick walls of Ironhold, turning the cold stone a warm gold. Shito rode Furball out of Yadu. The squig had grown to 2.5 meters tall. Its 4 short, thick legs left deep prints in the forest track, and the furred pad on its back warmed in the sun, making it a comfortable perch. "All right, shrink down. We're going to the dungeon," Shito said. As they neared Ironhold's gate, he patted Furball's head and quietly intoned the Wog spell. A pale green light wrapped the squig, and it shrank until it was the size of a cat. Obediently, it leapt into Shito's arms and rubbed its muzzle against his palm. He carried Furball and walked into Ironhold. The orc boys on the walls stopped and saluted with booming voices. "Boss!" they shouted, their shout shaking the leaves. "Keep at it, don't slack!" Shito smiled and waved, then continued toward the underground dungeon. The greenskins stepped aside, eyes full of respect. In the Blackrock tribe, Shito was more than a leader. He was the tribe's spokesman for the Wa gods, a warboss figure who had led them to more fights, more strength, and more beer. The dungeon lay in the deepest part of Ironhold. Carved from granite, its air smelled of damp iron and old blood. Cells ran down the corridor. In them were the beastmen prisoners captured earlier. When they saw Shito, their faces went white, and they huddled in corners, making no sound. "You made it, boss," the orc guarding the dungeon called, hurrying over with a respectful bow. "Scarface is in there interrogating a rat man. He couldn't take much more and already spilled a lot. Shito nodded and went to the innermost cell. Through iron bars, he saw Scarface raining blows down on a skinny slave rat. The rat man's pitiful cries rose and fell. Wounds laced his fur, but his belly was clearly bloated, a telltale sign he'd stolen food from the warehouse the night before. "Stop hitting him. Let me talk to him," Shito said. Scarface froze and turned, grinning when he saw him. "Boss, you came just in time. This little rat stole most of the food from the warehouse last night. The Gretchen caught him this morning, and after a few rounds, he told us everything." Shito stepped into the cell and put Furball on the stone floor. The squig sniffed the slave rat and let out a low growl. The rat went rigid with fear. Even as a Gretchen, Shito felt more terrifying to him than the orc boys who had just beaten him. There was something in Shito's eyes that seemed to strip away lies. "Tell me," Shito said, sitting on a nearby stone stool. His voice was calm but carried authority. "Why is your Jia clan targeting our Blackrock tribe?" The slave rat swallowed. His voice was a thin, trembling thing. Our clan's short on food. The clan leader told us to find food, steal it if we must. Before, Lord Yuka led scouts to see what was worth taking here." "Short on food?" Shito lifted an eyebrow. "You lot breed like mad. Isn't being short of food normal? Why target us specifically?" The rat stammered out the clan's secret. "Our numbers grew too fast. The clan leader tried to control it, but after hundreds of years, the base population's huge. New rats are born every year, and there just isn't enough food. All the clans have this problem. Our breeding's too fast." Shito listened. He already knew ratmen bred quickly, but the specifics made the scale clear. A female could have 3 to 5 litters a year, roughly 20 pups a litter, 60 a year. They matured in 5 years and lived about 20. Over a lifetime, a single female could father nearly 1,000 descendants. Without outside checks, ratman numbers climb until the food dies away. No wonder they raided constantly. Their hunger was their greatest enemy. "So how did your clan deal with this before?" Shito asked. "Before, the leader sent us to fight. Whether we won or lost, whenever a batch of rats died, the food shortage eased a bit." The rat's voice dropped. "But now the leader wants to save strength for a big event and forbids fighting recklessly. He cut rations for lower slaves and sent us to steal food from greenskins above ground. We've been scraping by." "Then what made you try stealing from us this time?" Shito asked. "Because the ogre tribe above us moved away." The slave rat's voice had a note of despair. "They were one of our main food sources. The ogres left enough for us to eat for half a year. Now they're gone and there's nothing left. So the clan leader sent Lord Yuka to scout and try to steal your food." Shito sat very still, fingers drumming the stool. It clicked into place. Jaya hadn't targeted Blackrock for spite or greed alone. They'd lost an essential food source and been driven to desperate measures. Yuka's scouting was the precursor to a larger strike, meant to judge Blackrock's strength. "How many did Yuka bring to scout? What's your clan's strength now?" Shito asked, his gaze sharpening. "Lord Yuka only took a few dozen slave rats to scout. Our clan's got more than 10,000 rats in all, over 2,000 storm vermin, and more than 5,000 clan rats. The rest are slave rats," the prisoner said, truthfully trembling. He didn't hide the numbers. Shito ran the numbers in his head. 10,000 sounded imposing, but most were weak slaves. The true fighters, storm vermin and clan rat, numbered just over 7,000, a little under the number of greenskins in Blackrock. Ratmen lacked solid fortifications. With good tactics, a fight was winnable. "And what does your clan leader plan next? When will they attack?" Shito asked. "I don't know. Lord Yuka only said to scout. He didn't say when they'd strike." The rat's eyes were wide. He clearly feared Scarface would resume the beating. Shito stood and looked down at the shaking slave rat. He had a plan. If Jia lacked food, they wouldn't delay long, but they wouldn't rush into a blind assault either until they had accurate information. Better to strike first, find the Jia lair and take out the clan leader and Lord Yuka. With their heads cut off, the ratmen would scatter. "Scarface," Shito said, "watch him closely. Don't let him die or run. I still need details. How the tunnels run, the habits of the clan leader and Yuka. Get it all out of him." Scarface grinned and snapped to attention. "Don't worry, boss. He won't lose a hair. If he doesn't talk, I'll beat him every day until he does. The slave rat nearly fainted, but offered no protest. Before these greenskins, he had no rights to beg. He would tell what he knew. Shitu picked up Furball and left the cell. The dank, bloody smell of the dungeon stirred something in him, a hunger for the coming fight. This war would protect Blackrock's food and wealth, yes, but it would also give the tribe's boys a reason to fight and grow stronger in battle. When he emerged into the plaza, sunlight flooded the training grounds. Orc boys swung axes, goblin archers peppered targets, and the Peejing sappers patched gaps in the wall's bricks. The tribe was awake, working, preparing for whatever came next. 129. Despicable Infiltrators. Inside the council hall of Yadu, Shito hunched over a huge beast-hide map, his fingertip tracing the area labeled Military Structures. The newly completed Dark Lair was circled in red charcoal, with nearby markings for the Squig Pen, Fighting Pit, Hunting Camp, and Shaman Hut. In just half a month, the Blackrock tribe's military installations were finished, and the list of trainable units on the system panel had grown so long it was dizzying. The common goblins are fine for moving bricks and mining, but we need new fighting units, Shito muttered, rubbing his chin as his eyes lingered on the Squig Pen and the Dark Lair. After upgrading the mushroom fields, the tribe's goblin population had doubled, but most were laborers who only knew how to swing a hoe. They still lacked enough cannon fodder units for the battlefield. Squig hoppers could use a squig's bouncing power for raids, and spider riders excelled at reconnaissance and harassment. Those two types had to be added quickly to prepare for a possible Ratman war. He stood and walked to the window to watch the greenskins on the training ground. Orc boys swinging axes bare-chested, goblins practicing stabbing around wooden stakes, and Peejing sappers running laps with tools on their backs. With the new military buildings, the system offered more unit choices, but not every option was practical. Deciding which to prioritize was the urgent problem. Let's look at the hunting camp first. Shito opened the system panel and clicked on the unit description for the hunting camp. Text popped up immediately. Unlocks Orc Archer Boy training. Consumes 10 points unit. Orc novices can advance to Orc Archer Boy, equipped with a short bow and arrows, specializing in ranged attacks. He snorted. Orcs with bows and arrows? What a joke. In the greenskin mind, wah! Meant charging forward and hacking the enemy face to face. Hiding behind and shooting arrows was something only a coward does, more shameful than being bitten by a squig. He pictured Orc Archer Boys on the battlefield, shooting wildly into the sky, dropping their bows before the arrows landed, then sprinting forward to join the melee. Any ranged unit like that would be less accurate than goblins throwing rocks. Pass. Shitu closed the panel. Even short on ranged fighters, he wouldn't waste orcs on archery. Their brute strength had to be used where it mattered. He clicked next to the fighting pit, and the panel updated. Level 3 Fighting Pit unlocks multiple training functions. 1. Orc novices consume 15 points unit and can advance to Orc Choppa Boy, equipped with an iron choppa and leather armor, specializing in close combat cleaving. 2. Goblin Spearmen consume 25 points unit and can advance to Vile Stalkers, equipped with a short dagger and smoke bombs, specializing in stealth assassination. 3. Goblin Spearmen consume 30 points unit and can advance to Goblin Wolf Riders, equipped with a scimitar and round shield, requiring accompaniment by big goblins and war wolves, specializing in mobile raids. Now that's more like it. Shitu's eyes lit up. Orc Choppa Boys would be the tribe's melee backbone. The iron choppas would cleave hard, and the leather armor could shrug off light blows, filling the gap left by too few orc big guys. But what excited him more were the 2 goblin options. He clicked the detailed description for Goblin Wolf Riders. Goblin Wolf Riders utilize big goblins as riders, paired with trained war wolves. They are fast and highly mobile, suitable for raiding in open areas and harassing enemy supply lines. Their drawbacks are low attack power and high morale fragility. Training requires the cooperation of big goblins and war wolves. His excitement cooled. Big goblins were a larger variant among goblins, and war wolves had to be captured and tamed from the forest. The Blackrock tribe had neither. No matter how good a unit, it had to be shelved for now. He sighed and moved on to the Vile Stalkers. The panel's description carried a dangerous gleam. Vile stalkers are elite assassins among the night goblins. They must be selected from the most insidious and cunning goblin spearmen and can only advance after undergoing stealth and assassination training in the fighting pit. Equipped with poisoned short daggers and smoke bombs, they specialize in battlefield stealth, using smoke cover to approach enemies, striking vital points, and retreating quickly. Suitable for assassinating enemy commanders and destroying facilities. Their drawback is weak frontal combat ability, making them unsuitable for direct charges. That's the one. Shito slammed his hand on the table, eyes flashing. When he had interrogated the captured slave rat earlier, he'd learned the Jia clan's tunnels were a complex labyrinth. A frontal assault would easily fall into traps. The Vile Stalker's stealth was perfect. They could slip into the Ratman tunnels, kill sentries, sabotage supplies, and even sneak into the clan leader's lair to catch the ringleader first. He remembered the system's cheeky assessment. Even the most heinous greenskin warlord must look upon the depravity of this band of goblins with new respect. Mocking, but true, Vile Stalkers were terrifying in their own way. They lacked the raw power of orcs and the shock of squighoppers, but they could deliver lethal strikes by the vilest means. They might not match Clan Eshin's assassins or the Dark Elves' killers, but for the tribe now, they're enough, he murmured. Eshin's Skaven were masters of poison and traps. Dark Elves could slip through shadows. Vile Stalkers had none of that flair, but they were cheap to train, quick to produce, and could exploit Greenskin's familiarity with the howling forest and underground tunnels. He closed the panel, walked back to the map, and drew a line between the fighting pit and the dark lair in charcoal. Step 1. Select 100 of the cleverest goblin spearmen and send them to the fighting pit to be trained as Vile Stalkers. Then train 200 orc choppa boys and 300 goblin spearmen to strengthen the front lines. Next, he circled the squig pen. Step 2. Skarsnik will pick 200 goblins to train as squig hoppers, and at the dark lair, will train another 100 spider riders to boost recon and harassment. Finally, he marked potential Ratman tunnel entrances and circled them in red. Step 3. Once the Vile Stalkers are ready, send them into the tunnels to find the Jia clan's lair and prepare for the assault. Boss, what are you thinking about? Big Smart pushed the door open, holding the newly compiled unit roster. Seeing Shito working the map, he leaned in. Looking at our new units, Shito said, pointing to the fighting pit. I plan to focus on training Vile Stalkers, orc choppa boys, and goblin spearmen. What do you think? Big Smart squinted at the list, then nodded vigorously. Boss is brilliant. Orcs for melee, goblins for stealth and ranged. Makes perfect sense. But we must pick the Vile Stalkers carefully. Choose goblins who hide well and like killing. Otherwise, the training will be wasted. I know, Shito replied with a smile. I'll let you pick the recruits when the time comes. You understand the goblins' minds best. Big Smart brightened. Don't worry, boss. I'll pick good stock. Each one better at hiding than a squig and meaner than a spider. Shito patted him on the shoulder and returned his gaze to the map. With the military structures finished and new units unlocked, the Blackrock tribe's fighting power was growing fast. Orc choppa boys and goblin spearmen for the front, squig hoppers and spider riders for raids, and Vile Stalkers for assassinations. With Ironhold's stout walls, he felt confident they could hold even if the Jia clan sent tens of thousands of Ratmen. The sun climbed higher. Shouts and the clash of weapons rose and fell from the training ground as the Greenskins drilled. This war with the Ratmen was not only to protect the tribe's food and wealth, it was a test of these new units and a step toward a bigger wag in the future. Just wait, clan leader, Shito whispered, tapping heavily on the Jia clan's area on the map. You'll learn that crossing the Blackrock tribe was your worst mistake. In a corner of the Ironhold dungeon, the slave rat Yala lay curled on a stone pallet strewn with straw, wrapped in a faded linen coat. Stone had had a goblin hand it to him, saying it was to keep him from freezing and spoiling the interrogation. The damp air smelled faintly of grain. There was half a wheat cake tucked against his chest. An extra, the goblin who brought his meal, had slipped him that morning. Its warmth left him perfectly content. In all his years in the Jia clan, Yala had never imagined days like this. Back then, he had been the lowest of the low, a slave rat who rose before dawn to dig tunnels and haul ore, fed a handful of moldy black rye, whipped by overseers the moment he slowed. But in the Greenskin's dungeon, though he was still chained, he could eat his fill, avoid backbreaking labor, and even feel the sun through the ventilation shaft. Such comforts felt like extravagance. Who? Yala let out a satisfied burp. His eyelids grew heavy, and he dozed against the cold wall. In his dream, he was no longer a bullied slave rat, but a storm vermin like Iuka, armored, carrying a poisoned dagger, all the Skaven bowing before him. "Wake up," a calm voice whispered in his ear. Yala jolted awake, fur prickling. He looked up and saw Stone standing by the cell, cradling a furry squig, pale green eyes half smiling. "Boss!" Yala scrambled off the pallet, neck hunched, heart hammering. Stone hadn't touched him the past few days, but everyone knew this goblin led the Greenskins here. He could make orcs obey and raise towering walls. He had to be sterner and smarter than clan leader Ira. Stone studied Yala with amusement. The slave rat had only been in the dungeon a few days, yet he'd plumped out. The shriveled belly was rounder, his face filled out, and his eyes shone brighter. The lure of regular food, it seemed, went a long way for Skaven. "Don't be afraid. I've got serious business with you." Stone motioned to the orc guard, who opened the cell and stepped inside. "You came from the Gia clan. I know your lair lies deep under the World's Edge Mountains. I need you to lead us to clan leader Ira. I need you to show us the Gia tunnels." Yala froze. Of course he knew the clan's location. He could have drawn a map of the tunnels with his eyes closed after more than a decade of digging and working those routes. But the thought of going back to the clan that had tormented him his whole life filled him with dread. In the Gia clan, he'd been nothing, beaten and cursed at will, treated like an expendable tool. If he led Greenskins to his kin, they would call him traitor and tear him apart. I can't." Yala lowered his head, voice trembling. "Clan leader Ira is powerful. The clan has many storm vermin and traps. If I go back, I'll be killed." Stone wasn't surprised. He sat on the pallet, stroked the squig, and spoke softly. "I know you're scared. In the Gia clan, you were a slave rat your whole life, doing the hardest work, eating the worst rations, getting beaten by overseers, and bullied by storm vermin. You had to be careful just to survive, didn't you?" Yala's head snapped up, shocked. How could this greenskin know his past? "You've been trampled by Skaven stronger than you," Stone continued gently. "But have you ever asked why? Why can those simple-minded storm vermin wear fine armor and eat the best rations while you only get moldy rye and get beaten?" Yala opened his mouth and found no answer. He had never thought to question it. Being a slave rat was simply the way of things, an iron rule ground into his bones. "It's not that you can't rise," Stone said, his voice growing warmer, his eyes flashing with a hunger that made Yala listen. "You just never had the chance. You know the Zaya tunnels, their traps, even the weaknesses of clan leader Ira and Iuka. That's your advantage. If you lead us to them, if we take Ira down, I'll give you the position of clan leader of the Zaya clan." "See clan leader?" Yala's eyes widened. He thought he'd misheard. Clan leader, the seat that decided the lives of every Skaven, offered to him. A slave rat? "You mean me?" "Yes," Stone nodded. His tone was hard to refuse. "You'll wear better armor than Iuka, carry sharper weapons than Ira. The other Skaven will bow to you. No one will dare bully you. You'll eat as much as you like. Isn't that what you want?" Stone's words spun through Yala's head like a spell. He could see it. Gleaming armor, the bone throne beneath him, the clan kneeling, Ira and Iuka bound at his mercy. Grain piled in the warehouses, wheat cakes and beer and fresh vegetables, never another crust of black rye. "I." Yala trembled, excitement warbling in his voice. His whole life had been a scramble to escape, to have power, to feast instead of gnawing rations. Now, the chance hung before him. All he had to do was agree. "You don't have to answer right now." Seeing the hunger in Yala, Stone pressed on. "I know you worry about controlling the clan. When the time comes, I'll leave some greenskins to back you, to help you stabilize the clan and train troops. Be obedient, and you'll keep the seat." That settled it. With greenskin muscle behind him, no storm vermin would dare defy him. Yala inhaled, lifted his head, eyes blazing with determination and reverence. "I agree. I'll take you to the Gia clan. I'll help you overthrow Ira." Stone smiled and clapped Yala on the shoulder. "Good. I didn't misjudge you. Nah, from today on, you're no longer Yala the slave rat. You're the future clan leader of the Jia clan, Yala. Yala could only nod, too excited to speak. Fear had been replaced by gratitude and fierce loyalty. The greenskin before him had handed him a new life. He vowed inwardly to seize it and not squander the chance. Stone called out as he left the cell. Scarface, get Yala some proper food and dry clothes. We march at first light. Got it, boss. Scarface's eager voice came from the passage. A shaft of sunlight cut through the dungeon and warmed Yala's face. He clenched his fists and swore silently. He would lead the Greenskins to the Jia clan, see Ira and Yuka fall with his own eyes, and take the bone throne that would be his. Stone stepped out into the corridor, and for the briefest moment, a faint smile touched his lips. 131, all packed and ready to go. The howling forest was still shrouded in mist that early morning, but the clearing outside Yadu's cave was already a hive of activity. Nearly 800 greenskins stood fully armed in a loose but lethal formation. The front row made of big orcs swinging giant axes and cleavers, their green muscles shining with an oily sheen in the weak sunlight, their heavy leather armor studded with bone spikes. In the middle stood goblin archers with iron bows slung across their backs and short knives at their waists, their small eyes shining with excitement. At the rear were goblin spearmen, long shafts tipped with cold, glinting spearheads that swayed in time with the formation's movement. Behind them, a logistics train of thousands of Gretchen stretched like a long green dragon into the trees. Most of those Gretchen were pushing specially made pump carts, sturdy oak frames, wheels wrapped in thick hide and piled with bulging burlap sacks of rye biscuits, dried mushrooms, and enough black mushroom spirits to feed the whole army for 3 days. Most striking of all were several carts neatly stacked with pale green bars of soap that sent a faint herbal scent into the air, an odd contrast to the sweat and animal hide smell of the greenskins. Bring all the soap. If anyone's lazy and doesn't bathe, I'll throw him to Furball as a snack, the goblin in charge of supplies bellowed, his whip cracking. Ever since Stone instituted the hygiene rules, the Blackrock tribe's greenskins no longer stank like they used to. They had to bathe after every training session and clean their armor with soap weekly. Violators lost beer at best, found themselves chased and snapped at by Furball at worst. For greenskins, beer and face mattered more than life, so being clean had, surprisingly, become a point of pride. Advance! The army roared and began to march toward Ironhold. The orcs' steps made the earth tremble lightly, goblin laughter echoed through the trees, and the Gretchen pushed their carts in a frenzy of short-legged motion. For greenskins, war was the grandest carnival. Just the thought of rooting out the ratmen in subterranean tunnels prickled their blood. As the main force approached Ironhold's gates, more greenskins spilled out from inside. Nearly 500 orc cleaver boys and goblin stalkers joined the column from within, swelling the ranks. The open space before Ironhold packed with bodies, armor clanged, weapons whooshed, Gretchen shouted and gossiped, a wild battle song filling the clearing. The logistics tale followed close behind. In addition to the Gretchen's pump carts, several larger wagons drawn by giant squigs lumbered along, loaded with battering rams for sieges, wooden planks for shoring tunnels, and bundles of torches. These had been specially prepared by the Peejing sappers on Stone's orders. Nobody knew what traps the ratmen might have laid underground, so it was better to be overprepared. In the very center of the formation, Stone rode atop the Arachnari giant spider, Little Piggy. The beast had grown to 5 meters long and almost 2 meters tall, its ink-black carapace gleaming like metal, 8 thick legs leaving deep prints in the soft soil. A tanned hide cushion was lashed to its back, making it as steady as a platform. On Stone's shoulder, a furry squig lay sprawled, and Furball had curled down to the squig's size, nestling into the soft fur and popping his head up now and then to watch the passing greenskins. This was the largest expedition the Blackrock tribe had ever mounted, and Stone took it with deadly seriousness. The Jia clan numbered tens of thousands of ratmen and lived in elaborate tunnels full of unknown traps and weapons. A single mistake could turn the battle into disaster. He had brought most of the tribe's capable fighters and arranged abundant logistics and reserves, even having Big Smart personally supervise the supply lines. Provisions first, Then the army, Stone always said. Supply was the backbone of the force. There could be no errors. Boss, don't worry. I've packed the rations by day, labeled everything, and trained the Gretchen on quick unloading. No delays. Big Smart hustled up to Little Piggy, clutching a roll of oiled hide ledger, his small eyes glittering with scheming pride. Since being made chief logistics manager, he'd spent every waking hour in the warehouses counting supplies, organizing transport, and drilling the Gretchen. Stone inclined his head. Good. Tell the stalkers to keep their eyes open. Make sure the ratmen don't ambush us. I already did. 10 vile stalkers are scouting ahead, and spider riders patrol both flanks. Any sign, they'll report it. Big Smart answered quickly. A sycophantic voice piped up then. Boss, how do you like my new outfit? Doesn't it look sharp? If we beat the clan leader, I'll manage the Jia clan proper and make every ratman obey you. Stone frowned and turned. A slave rat, Yadu, trotted beside the column in a new hide tunic, pulling an eager, flattering grin. Ever since Yadu had agreed to guide them, he'd been trying to prove his loyalty at every turn, offering to help dig tunnels, claiming he knew the food caches, constantly underfoot. Drag him away, Stone said flatly. 2 vile stalkers in black leather slipped out from the trees, grabbed Yadu by the arms, and hauled him to the rear without ceremony. Yadu flailed and protested, but the cold, hard glare of the stalkers shut him up. He went along obediently, still burning with ambition. If he could get the clan leader out of the way, maybe he could become leader of his clan, and no one would look down on him ever again. The Greenskin force continued its march toward the World's Edge Mountains. The mist thinned and shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy, glinting off armor and weapons. Orcs cheered and brandished weapons. Goblins whispered about how they'd catch ratmen, and Gretchen hummed discordant tunes while pushing their carts. Stone rode Little Piggy with his gaze fixed ahead. He knew the campaign against the Jia clan wouldn't be easy. The underground terrain, hidden traps, and unknown enemy numbers were all serious hazards. Yet he believed that if the tribe held together, if supplies held, and if Yadu led faithfully, they would smash the ratmen and end the threat for good. Furball, don't go running off once we go underground, Stone murmured, stroking the little dog. Furball pressed against his hand and gave a soft woof, as if he understood. Slowly, the convoy's footsteps faded as it plunged deeper into the howling forest. The Greenskins began to sing their war song, arms slung over each other's shoulders, voices rising in a wild chorus. Our boots will stomp the rat nests flat. Our fangs will tear through rat throats. Greenskins' war cry will root out the tunnel dung. Rusty cleavers will split open rat bellies. Gooey guts will splatter like paint. Charge! Who cares for traps or poison mists? Hack! Kick rat heads for fun. Their squeals will be our drumbeat. Their sorcerer's broken magic. One axe blow will shatter it. No tunnel can stop our march. No rat will live this hour. Our axes will drink rat blood. Our banners will be stained with their brains. Who, crush their eggs, smash their nests. We'll break the Rat King's bones into sticks to play with. We'll plunder all their food and chew it up until not a single rat gasps underground. Only then will we stagger home, drunk on spoils. Their voices rolled on, a savage, jubilant chant, as the Greenskins disappeared down the forest path, all set for the descent into the darkness below. 132. Crypt. There was no day or night in the dark underworld, only the faint green glow of bioluminescent moss clinging to the rock, barely tracing the contours of the tunnels. The winding passages braided together like the web of an arachnari giant spider, folding up and down, splitting into forks and vertical tangles. Even the most route-hardened Skaven could lose their way if they weren't careful. Water dripped steadily from the cavern roof, striking the sewage-dark floor and echoing through the tight spaces, making the tunnels feel colder and emptier. Against that oppressive stillness came the sound of many feet. A patrol of Skavens slunk into view. 2 clan rats led the line, shoulder to shoulder, bristling with complaints that translated into sharp squeaks and mutters, every sound amplified in the tunnel and mingling with the rank Skaven stench. Damn it, we can't live like this! The clan rat on the left snapped, kicking a pebble that skittered into the muck and sent a spray of black-brown water spattering. His name was Sharpclaw. He was stouter than most in his squad, wearing patched leather armor, a polished short sword at his hip, and a wooden shield with worn edges, gear considered excellent for a patrol. He'd spent 10 years in the clan, and 2 years earlier had been on a surface raid with the team. Back then, they ate meat every meal and sometimes saved half a bag of wheat cakes. Since the famine struck half a year ago, the good times had evaporated. "You're lucky," snapped the clan rat on the right. Broken Tail's walk was akimbo. A falling rock had taken most of his tail while digging, and his steps never quite steadied. "My 3 brats chewed bark yesterday. Meanwhile, the clan leader gnaws on meat every day. Lord Ayuka drinks dwarf beer. Why should we starve?" Broken Tail's resentment was sharp enough to taste. His hand kept rubbing the short knife at his waist. The knife he'd traded half a bag of wheat cakes for, intending it as a coming-of-age present for his eldest son. Now, it was all he, weapon and consolation. Behind them moved 12 slave rats, skeletal and silent, wearing tattered rags at best. Their weapons were worse: rusted blades with serrated edges, broken spears, or woven branch shields that would splinter under pressure. Their eyes were dull, faces blank, tails limp. They shuffled along in weak, uneven steps, each movement seeming to drain them. The smallest of them stumbled and nearly fell. Sharpclaw barked, "Trash! Slack off again and I'll carve you up for meat." Fear tightened the slave rat's shoulders. He forced his pace, but his expression showed nothing. In the Jaya clan, slave rats were worth less than dung. Starvation, beatings, and being executed as emergency rations were ordinary. When famine began, the slave rat's dole had been the first to shrink. Later it was cut again, by a third, to feed the clan rats. The elite, clan leader Ela, young clan leader Yuka, and the storm terror rats remained untouched, still feasting on meat and cakes pilfered from dwarf caravans while the rest scrabbled. Everyone knew this couldn't hold. Food stores were low. The ogre tribe, once a steady supply, was gone. Desperation spread. Squads sent to forage returned empty-handed or didn't return at all. Those that vanished probably starved in the tunnels and were eaten by beasts or their kin. As food dwindled, cannibalism began. First, a few smallest slave rats were gnawed to the bone by their fellows. Instead of panic, the news hardened people. Rat meat became official emergency rations. Any slave rat caught slacking or trying to run might be executed and parceled out. In 10 days, 30% of the slave rats were gone. The rest were mere skeletons. Tension boiled over half a month ago. Ela ordered clan rat rations halved, and hundreds of clan rats marched to the Bone Throne to demand fair distribution. Some even shouted, "Overthrow Ela." Ela answered with iron. He led 200 storm terror rats out and slaughtered hundreds of the most vocal clan rats. The square in front of the palace ran red before the corpses were dragged away as food for patrols. The massacre broke the riot, but it could not fix the problem. Ela sent numerous squads to find new sources, some deeper underground to dig roots or seek ore to trade, others to the surface to scout for greenskin camps. Most returned empty, some never returned. Then, 3 days earlier, a scout came back with news that electrified the clan. The main force of the Blackrock tribe had left Ironhold on an expedition. The garrison left behind was mostly goblins and Gretchen, and the wall guards were thinly manned. The Jia clan erupted. Skaven crowded the palace, hoarsely begging Ela to let them make the surface run, slaughter the greenskins, seize their food and livestock, take Ironhold. Ela seized the chance. He mobilized the bulk of the fighting force, 1,500 clan rats, 2,000 slave rats, and 500 storm terror rats, under young clan leader Yuka, and they flooded toward the surface through the tunnel nearest Ironhold. Ela left only 200 old, weak, and sick Skaven to guard the lair and the meager remaining stores. Sharpclaw and Broken Tail's patrol was among the unlucky squads left behind, tasked with sealing tunnels and preventing others from claiming the vacuum. It felt like punishment, no chance at the surface bounty, only endless labyrinth and hunger. Sharpclaw spat into the sewage. Broken Tail unhooked his water skin and took a small, rusty sip, the only decent thing they had to slake thirst. "Stop whining," Broken Tail said. "Remember the last patrol? They were lost 3 days. When they were found, only bones. Blind worms," they said. Sharpclaw said nothing, just quickened his step, resentful. What neither of them noticed were the shadowy figures gliding silently behind them. They moved with cat-like lightness, breaths nearly inaudible, only faint red glints marked their eyes. These were vile stalkers, sent by Stone. According to the plan, Stone's greenskin force would wait at the tunnel mouth while the stalkers slipped in first, clearing patrols and smoothing the path for the main army. Clad in special black leather to melt into the dark, the stalkers carried poisoned daggers and smoke bombs, placing each footfall where it would not be seen. The patrol reached a fork. Sharpclaw and Broken Tail crouched to check the claw marks carved into the stone, simple route sigils. The slave rats froze, listless, many worried only about their rumbling bellies, not even turning to listen when faint cloth sounds came from behind. "Let's go this way," Sharpclaw decided. "2 more forks and we'll be at the temporary outpost. I hid half a handful of wheat cakes. I'll share." Broken Tail brightened. "Good. My belly's almost flat." They picked up the trail. After 3 more turns, they reached a more complex junction where 5 tunnels branched and the symbols at the entrances were nearly identical. Sharpclaw squinted, turning over the markings. Broken Tail leaned in to help. Then Sharpclaw remembered the slave rats and turned to urge them on, only to find that the line behind him was not the numb, familiar shapes he expected. 4 dark figures had filled the space where his men had stood. Clad in black leather, their skin pale green like the greenskins, eyes glittering red, short daggers flashing with cold, they bore cruel smiles. "Enemies!" Sharpclaw's voice died between his teeth. His hand. He was too slow. A stalker lunged, and the dagger slashed across his throat. Black-brown blood sprayed, and his body sagged, eyes wide with shock and terror. Sharpclaw never screamed. Death took him almost instantly. Broken Tail turned to run and felt a crushing blow smash his knee. Bone cracked with a wet sound. He went down screaming, then a dagger punched into his chest. The stalkers moved like a single blade. The slave rats, already hollow with hunger and fear, either tried to run and fell, or simply collapsed without the strength to fight. The short daggers blinked in the moss light. In quick, silent efficiency, every one of the 12 slave rats lay still, their blood the only sound besides the eternal drip. When it was done, the lead stalker signaled his companions to search the bodies. Satisfied there were no survivors, he drew a torch filled with specially mixed fuel and fluorescent powder. The faint light it threw was easy to spot in the dark. He jammed the torch into a crevice at the junction, the signal for Stone's main force. The light painted the Skaven corpses and the tunnel walls in an eerie glow. "Move on. Next patrol point," the leader murmured, his voice flat. For them, clearing this patrol had been only the first step. The lair of the Jaya clan lay ahead. Stone's main army needed a clear route. The torch burned on, small and silent in the black tunnel, marking the way. Deep in the black tunnel, Shito carried Yala by the scruff of the neck, leading the column like he was lugging a squirming chick. The new animal hide clothes on the little Skaven were already caked in grime and gave off the sour, unmistakable stench of his kind. Yala dared not complain. He trembled and pointed ahead at a fork. "Lee, the left one. Walk 300 steps, then turn right, and you'll reach the outer edge of the clan's restricted area. The tunnel there is wider. More of you can get through." Shito narrowed his eyes at the route Yala described. Since they had entered the underways, Yala had called out forks a dozen times. Every distance and turning angle had been precise to the step. He glanced down at the crude map tucked under his arm. Yala had sketched it overnight in charcoal, marking main passages, traps, and food stores. The lines were wobbly, but the details were startlingly exact. Shito's grip tightened. "Don't try any tricks," he said, voice low and icy, fingers worrying the small axe at his belt. "I know how Skaven are. If you betray me, you'll know what happens." Yala's little eyes widened with terror. "I wouldn't dare. I promise, boss. I'll lead you to Ila's lair. Once you kill him, I'll—" "Shut up." Shito cut him off. The rat's endless babbling about becoming a clan leader had already frayed his patience. Still, Shito knew Yala wouldn't betray them for the moment. The Zia clan was a nightmare to a lowly slave rat, and following Shito offered steady food and the faint hope of advancement. That was enough to keep him in line. The Greenskin army pressed forward laboriously through the tunnel. At the entrance, the passage was scarcely wide enough for 2 abreast, so the over 2,000 greenskins formed a single, long, crawling column. The orc boys were itching to swing their great axes. Goblin archers clutched iron bows, eyes darting. Sappers pushed a rattling pump cart and tiptoed around loose stones, terrified to make a sound. "Keep quiet, all of you. Anyone who shouts won't get to fight." Shito barked softly. Long ago he had imposed a rule. Any orc who made noise would be barred from the fight. For an orc, being kept from battle was worse than death, and the threat worked. The formerly rowdy column fell instantly mute, leaving only footfalls and breathing. He handled the goblins differently. Big Smart had told them, if we sneak in and steal the Skaven's food and weapons, everyone will get new iron bows and the strongest mushroom wine. If we get found now, we lose the fight and go hungry. That hit where it hurt. The goblins tightened their steps and watched the darkness instead of chatting. The Gretchen were the worst. Small, excitable, and noisy, no matter what you did to them. Shito solved that by having orc boys and their squig mounts carry them, 2 Gretchen clutched in an orc's arms, a few lashed to squig backs. It reduced the racket and sped the column along. 100 vile stalkers prowled ahead like ghosts. Dressed in black leather with cloth-masked faces and poisoned daggers, they were assigned to thin-out Skaven patrols. Over the past 5 days, they'd cut down more than a dozen scouting parties. From the spoils, the Skaven were in worse shape than expected. Rusty blades, gaunt bellies, weak swings, a people starving to the bone. Big Smart caught up, beaming and carrying a beast-hide ledger. "Boss, we've got hardtack for 3 days, water enough, and soap. The lads can wash daily. No sickness. Water's in ceramic pots, and we have guys to hand it out every so often. Hardtack sealed in burlap, with torches to keep it from going pitch black." Shito nodded. Thanks to Big Smart's logistics, 5 days underground had not sapped their energy. Armor remained polished, weapons sharp. Yet the urge to fight within the column crackled. Orcs twitched with axes, goblins fingered bowstrings, even squigs clutched small iron shovels. If Shito didn't let them loose soon, they'd turn on one another. Far ahead in the same web of tunnels, Ela led 5,000 Skaven. He rode a massive carrion rat, clad in black iron studded with bone spikes, clutching a scepter inlaid with warpstone. He dreamed of Ironhold as a pile of hardtack and beer, of troops in fine armor bowing to him. "Faster, move faster," he shrieked. "The greenskin main force isn't here. The walls are full of old and sick. Rush in, grab their food, and slaughter their greenskins." At the very front, Yuka rode with 200 storm terror rats, heavy plate clad, poisoned short axes at the ready, the Gia clan's elite. He and Ela both fantasized about using victories in Ironhold to climb the clan ladder. Success translated to power. The clan rats and slave rats surged forward on hunger and greed. After months of famine, even the thought of Ironhold's stores quickened their feet. "Turn ahead! After this bend, it's a short run to the surface exit," Ela cried. But as Ela rounded the bend, he froze. In the tunnel ahead, a patch of something green gleamed under torchlight. "What is that?" he muttered. "How are so many fungi growing here?" Yuka leaned forward, then his face went white. "Not mushrooms," he hissed. "Greenskins. It's a greenskin army." At the same moment, Shito saw the Skaven. He had expected Yala to lead them around to the lair. Meeting the main Skaven force head-on in the maze-like passages was not what he'd planned. Where were his scouts? Why hadn't they reported? His gaze snapped to Yala in accusation. The little rat was shaking so hard his hide wrinkled. "I don't know. This route shouldn't cross the main force. They were supposed to attack Ironhold." There was no time for questions. The Skaven ahead were already shrieking and surging. In that tangled underground, patrols could come from unexpected angles. Losing contact with scouts was never fully their fault. The clash was unavoidable. "Get your gear ready." Shito shoved a blocking orc aside, drew his short axe, and bellowed to the column. "Kill every Skaven. Take all their food. Let them know who rules the tunnels." Wah! The pent-up fury of 5 days poured out. Orc boys charged, axes swinging. Goblin archers loosed iron bolts that sang through the air. Vile stalkers vanished into the Skaven ranks, daggers drinking poisoned blood. Squigs leapt free and hacked at slave rats' ankles with little iron shovels. Ela stared in stunned disbelief. Hadn't they been told the greenskin main force was away? His dreams of easy plunder collapsed into cold terror. There was no retreat. He gritted his teeth and ordered, "Kill! Anyone who tries to run becomes emergency rations." The Skaven's eyes flared red. Starving or not, instinct and hunger drove them to fight. The tunnel filled with the clash of metal, the howls of the dying, the greenskins' roars, and the Skaven's high shrieks. A brutal, chaotic battle erupted in the stifling dark. 134. Crypt Ratman Wars 2. In the narrow cave passage, the air itself seemed set ablaze by blood and fury. The cold rock walls pressed in on both sides, narrowing sightlines so that every swing was the kind of desperate, all-or-nothing strike a warrior gives when burning his boats behind him. Here, neat formations and proud tactics meant nothing. Only raw ferocity and the madness of close combat decided life and death.
Why?
Glenn's roar shook grit from the stone. The massive orc, an iron behemoth in plate armor, charged like a runaway chariot. Bone spikes on his pauldrons still gleamed with the skulls of some beast he had taken as trophies. He hefted a two-handed great axe taller than a man and smashed into the crowd of Skaven. The blade swept low and horizontal, cleaving 3 slave rats in half at once. Black and red blood spattered his green hide, but he barely slowed. Close behind him, Bone Tree was just as savage. He had ditched his throwing spears and now wielded a short-handled warhammer in each hand. Every blow crushed skull and shell alike. The snap of bone, the groan of bent armor, and the skittering, high-pitched screams of the Skaven merged into a brutal battle hymn. In the cramped tunnel, the greenskin savagery was absolute. Most of the orc boys wore heavy armor, iron plates over leather, and the clan rats' short knives left nothing but white scars against such defense. Even the smaller goblins wore light chain and carried spears forged by Guzana, tips keen enough to pierce Skaven leather. In contrast, most slave rats lacked proper clothing or gear. Rusty blades, broken sticks, patchwork leathers offered them little protection. In the first clash, the Skaven were pushed back, step by step, hacked into retreat like wheat before a scythe. The greenskins became a wedge that ripped the Skaven ranks open. Orcs hacked at the front, goblins stabbed at the flanks, and vile stalkers slipped around to harry stragglers in the rear. A storm terror rat tried to ambush Glenn, leaping with a short axe aimed for a throat. Glenn sidestepped and backhanded the great axe. The rat and its weapon split in two. This storm terror rat, reputed invincible within its clan, didn't survive 3 moves. High on a bloated carrion-ridden mount, the clan leader watched the one-sided slaughter and felt his chest tighten as if struck by a hammer. He had expected that sheer numbers would grind the greenskins down. Even if the greenskins were fierce, the Skaven could swarm them. He had forgotten 2 things. Famine had hollowed out his troops, and the greenskins were not only well-armed, but fought without fear. Worse, the narrow passage ruined everything the Skaven did best. Their favored human wave tactics couldn't be used at all. Instead, they were targets. "Calm, everyone, calm," the clan leader shrieked, slamming his warpstone scepter into the flagstones so hard the sound echoed. "This pass is too narrow. We can't use our numbers. Yuka, take 200 Storm Terror Rat and 500 Clan Rat. Hold the rear. The rest of you, fall back with me. Back to the lair." He knew that if they kept fighting here, the 5,000 Skaven would be slaughtered. Only by retreating into the Jia clan's core tunnels, into the maze of passages and traps they knew intimately, could they hope to turn this into a guerrilla war. With the greenskins deep underground and their supply lines stretched, relentless harassment might exhaust them. Yuka hated it, but he knew it was the only plan. He drew a poisoned dagger and hissed to the ranks behind him, "Hold the line! If any of you flee, I'll gut you myself." 200 Storm Terror Rat formed a shield wall of heavy plate, bracing the tunnel. 500 Clan Rat crouched behind them with knives raised, massed to buy time. The clan leader seized the moment and led the rest, over 4,000 Skaven, toward the inner tunnels. Slave rats surged forward like a black tide. Clan rat fell back, glancing nervously over shoulders, dread of being overtaken by the greenskins written on their faces. The passage filled with chaos, screeches and curses, and the guttering roars of the orcs turned the cavern into a maelstrom. "Chase them! Kill those wretches!" an orc boy shouted, blood-stained axe raised, eager to pursue. Stone's hand gripped his arm and hauled him back. "Stop! No pursuing!" Stone spoke with the kind of authority that brooked no question. He knew better than anyone they could not blindly follow. The underground was full of traps and forks, and the greenskins knew next to nothing of its layout. To pursue into the tunnels was to hand themselves to Skaven snares. The crude map one of the slave rats had drawn showed only the main routes. No one knew how many pit traps, poisoned needles, or secret galleries lay beyond. But boss, we nearly had them, the orc protested. Nearly got some of our brothers killed, Stone snarled, jerking his chin toward the dark mouth of the passage. Do you know how many traps they've got in there? How many troops still lie in their lairs? Blind chase will cost us lives. Slowly, the fighters' bloodlust cooled. They were veterans. They had seen the cost of underestimating an enemy. Stone scanned the near shadows and barked, "Slave rat, come here!" One of the slave rats scurried forward, face a mask of fawning terror. "Boss, yes, boss! Show me the way," Stone said, pointing to the path the Skaven had taken. His eyes were cold. "Clan leaders heading for the core tunnels, right? What traps are on that route? Any shortcuts? Anything we can use to get ahead of them?" The rat's heart pounded. He hadn't expected Stone to want to outflank them. Still, the look in Stone's eyes left no room for lies. He stammered, "Yes, clan leaders going back to the core. The main path has 3 traps, trapdoors and poisoned needles. I know how to avoid them. There's a secret passage I dug before. It'll get us to the side of the core tunnels in half the time of the main route." Stone nodded. "Good. Lead us through it. Tell us where the traps are and how to neutralize them." "I'll take you there," the rat chirped, inwardly terrified but eager to please. If the greenskins cracked the lair, perhaps he'd win favor with his clan. Stone turned to issue orders. "Glenn, you take 200 orcs and 100 goblins. Clear the passage behind us and guard the supply train. When Big Smart's provisions catch up, join us. Bone Tree, you take 300 orcs and 200 goblins and follow me through the secret passage. Circle the lair and hit it from the side. The rest, stay where you are. Check your weapons and armor." "Boss," Glenn and Bone Tree answered in one, and Glenn led his band deeper into the tunnel to mop up stragglers and escort the logistics. Bone Tree fell into formation with the slave rat guiding them toward the hidden way. Others set down weapons for a moment to patch armor and wolf down hardtack. These were warriors who had bled together. Despite their savagery, they kept discipline. Stone watched them, resolve hardening in his chest. This fight for the Jia clan's stores was more than immediate plunder. It was a foothold underground, the start of a future he would not squander it through recklessness or arrogance. "Let's go," Stone said, clapping Bone Tree on the shoulder, and they slipped after the slave rat into the shadowed secret passage. Deep under the core lair of the Jia clan, the clan leader sat on a throne of bleached bones, idly turning a warpstone inlaid ring on his finger with a smug expression. He had just learned from the retreating Skaven that his rearguard had delayed the greenskins' pursuit. Now the foolish greenskins would have to inch forward, checking for traps in the main tunnels, while he had already set thousands of clan rats to lie in wait at every intersection. If the greenskins dared step into his encirclement, they would be met with a rain of poisoned needles, collapsing trapdoors, and relentless waves of Skaven. "Humph," the clan leader sneered. "Greenskins, only strength, no cunning." He flicked a claw toward an attendant. "Check the food stores again, and drag out the disobedient slave rat. Give him to the brothers as extra rations. Once we finish with the greenskins, we'll go to the surface and eat like kings." The attendant bowed and scurried away. The clan leader sank deeper into fantasies of conquering Ironhold, unaware of a deadly shadow that had skirted past all the ambushes and was now racing toward his lair through a long-forgotten secret passage. In that narrow, damp tunnel, a slave rat walked at the front with a trembling torch, carefully skipping over rubble. Water dripped from the ceiling, pinging off the armor of the greenskins behind him. 50 more steps, he hissed over his shoulder to Stone, voice tight with barely contained fear and hope. Then we'll reach the side platform of the core cavern. Once they stepped onto that ledge, there was no turning back. Either they watched the greenskins level the Xia clan, or they would be abandoned by both sides. Stone gave a curt nod and made a low prepare gesture. Bone Tree tightened his grip on his warhammer. Glenn rested his great axe on his shoulder, and Scarface licked his lips, eyes glittering with the taste of blood. More than 200 orc boys, over 300 goblins, and 50 vile stalkers held their breath, weapons ready for the signal. A sliver of light appeared at the end of the passage. The slave rat hurried forward, shoved aside a loose stone, and a wide platform opened up before them. It was half the size of a football field, its edges falling away into sheer cliffs, and below yawned a vast cavern, the core lair of the Jia clan. Stone stepped onto the ledge and froze. The cavern spread out far, far larger than Yadu, its rock walls honeycombed with small holes where slave rats lived. Crude wooden houses clustered on the floor, clan rats scurrying about with ore. In the center rose a temple of white bone and black iron, carved with the likeness of a huge rat's head, the sigil of the great horned rat. Beside it stood a relatively opulent dwelling, studded with glowing warpstone, the clan leader's house. By the gods, they've hidden deep, Glenn breathed, eyes wide. He had never imagined such a colossal underground city. Stone's shock passed quickly, and his gaze sharpened. He pointed at the temple and the warpstone-studded residence. "Those two buildings," he said flatly. "The temple's where the priests and elites are. The other is the clan leaders. Those are our targets." The greenskins' surprise turned to hunger for battle. Orc boys roared and brandished their weapons. Goblin archers knocked arrows and trained them on the Skaven below. The vile stalkers melted into shadow and slipped toward the edge, ready to drop and strike. The slave rats in the cavern were hauling ore when they looked up and saw the crowd of greenskins. Instantly they screamed, thin, terrified cries that echoed small and helpless in that vast space. Years of famine and slavery had broken their will. They did not fight. "What are you squalling about? They're only greenskins," a clan rat barked as he poked his head out. But when he saw the sea of greens on the ledge, his face drained of color, and he tried to flee. Stone sneered, grabbed the corpse of a clan rat he'd found, and flung it over the edge. It tumbled down and landed with a dull thud on the cavern floor. "Boys," he thundered to his followers, "let these Skavens see what we're made of. Twist off their heads for trophies. Whoever brings back the most gets a jar of the strongest black mushroom spirits." "Wah!" The greenskins erupted. The orc boys were first to leap from the platform, falling like tumbling stones into the cavern. Their axes rose and fell, splitting through Skaven bodies. Goblin archers sent a rattle of arrows down, each shaft finding flesh. Vile stalkers slipped into wooden houses like ghosts, short blades harvesting lives in the dark. Scarface vaulted onto the back of a giant carrion rat, seized the Skaven by the ear, tore its head off, and hoisted it high, roaring triumphantly. The cavern became a maelstrom of violence. Skaven scattered. Some dove into huts, some cowered in the holes of the rock face, some dropped to their knees begging. None spared themselves. Blood slicked the floor, and the air filled with the metallic tang of gore. The commotion drew the temple's priests. Clad in black robes and clutching warpstone-tipped staves, they surged out with elite guards and unleashed waves of dark energy. The black bolts struck true. Dozens of goblins convulsed and collapsed. "They can use magic," an orc boy cried, raising his axe to fend off a black surge. The blade sizzled and blistered with corrosive marks. Bone Tree snorted and charged the temple guards, warhammer swinging. He ducked under a blast, leaped and smashed a priest's skull to pulp. "Not with me around," he bellowed. Glenn led the orc boys in hard behind him, their great axes cleaving through another of the priest's waves. Orcs fell to the magic, but fear was a foreign thing. They used their bodies to carve a bloody wedge to the temple. Stone watched from the platform, lips curved in satisfaction. The outcome was no longer in doubt. The Skaven were starved, their ranks thinned, their terrain advantage lost. Soon the temple and the clan leader's house would fall. He only had to wait for the breach so he could seize the clan leader and finish the Jia clan. "Slave rat," Stone said to the trembling creature at his side, voice low and dangerous. "See this. This was your clan. Soon it'll be history. And you'll be the new clan leader, so long as you don't try anything clever." The slave rat nodded so hard his tiny eyes gleamed with a mixture of terror and feverish hope. He had been beaten and starved by those around him. Now they would pay. He watched the Skaven scatter, feeling nothing like pity. The slaughter rolled on. Screams, pleas for mercy, and the clash of steel braided together into a brutal hymn of war. In another part of the cavern, the true clan leader was racing toward the temple with his guards, every step driven by the need to stop the greenskins before their coup could be completed. The roars from deep within the cave rolled through the rock like boiling magma, carrying blood and despair. The dense slave rat nests that lined the walls had been breached, and a tide of emaciated figures squeezed out of openings barely wide enough for one. Tattered rags hung from their bodies in shreds, revealing ribs like withered branches. In their hands were not weapons, but blunted hoes, broken mining picks, and chewed beast bones, tools of labor turned into instruments of death by the clan rat overseer's whips. Faster! One step slower, and you'll be fed to the carrion rats. A clan rat hissed as his whip cracked across a slave rat's back. The man stumbled forward, too weak even to cry. Those behind shoved him like pebbles in a torrent, driving the line toward the greenskins. Some collapsed after a few steps from sheer hunger, only to be trampled into a smear of flesh and broken bone. Others fell before the Orcish blades could reach them, eyes glazing at the cave ceiling until cold iron slit their throats and they twitched once, then went still. Many Skaven even took the chance to gnaw at their fallen kin and at the greenskins' corpses. At first, the greenskins could cope. Bone Tree's warhammer smashed slave rats into pulp. Black-red blood and flesh spattered his iron armor and congealed into thick scabs. Goblin spearmen skewered 2 or 3 rats at a time, corpses dangling from their spear tips like rotten fruit. Still, the tide of vermin did not stop. From the shadows, the true slaughter began. Clan rats smashed through crude wooden shacks and ripped off doors to use as shields. Skaven, hidden in rock crevices, lunged with poisoned daggers, clamping onto an orc's lower leg. Even if their skulls were crushed by a hammer, their teeth didn't let go. Others burrowed through abandoned tunnels and exploded up from the dirt under a greenskin's feet, claws raking at ankles. Many died, crushed into paste, but took a foe with them. Primal slaughter erupted at every turn. Glenn had just cleaved a clan rat's head when a sharp pain lanced his back. A Skaven, hiding on a rafter, had plunged a short dagger through his leather armor. Black blood trickled from the wound. He whirled, grabbed the Skaven by its hair, and smashed its head against a wooden pillar. The skull cracked, and brains splattered the stained wood. Before he could breathe, 3 clan rats leapt from a broken window and drove daggers at his throat, belly, and knee. He abandoned parry, using armored forearms to block 2 blows, while his other hand swung his great axe to split the 3rd Skaven in 2. Blood dripped down his arm and pooled on the floor. "Damn it, these bastards hide worse than squigs," an orc boy cursed. He had just felled a slave rat when a clan rat's poisoned dart struck his shoulder. Black venom ran along his arm, it stiffened, and his great axe clattered to the ground. Before he could draw a dagger, the surging slave rats tackled him. Dozens of claws raked his face, teeth tore at flesh. His screams were smothered by the squeaking tide. When his comrades finally dragged him free, his face was chewed beyond recognition. He still breathed faintly, but clearly would not last. Stone stood on a rock at the edge of the platform, arms crossed. Below, the greenskins were divided into 3 sectors. The orcs were locked in the wooden shack area, every step forward forcing them over piles of bodies. The goblins formed a spear line at the temple's outskirts, but were pushed back by wave after wave of slave rats. Some were squeezed and tumbled into the underground river, swept away by the current. The vile stalkers could clear shadows, but not stem the endless reinforcements pouring from every cave mouth. Stone had just watched one stalker throw a smoke bomb, kill 3 clan rats, and then be swallowed alive by slave rats that surged out of a side tunnel, no time even to scream. "Ironclaw, raise the flag!" Stone's voice came hoarse. Ironclaw, the standard bearer, obeyed at once. He hoisted the greenskin battle banner, black squig embroidered on green, its beast bone finial glinting in the torchlight. The signal Stone had drilled before the expedition now became the only order in the chaos. Ironclaw drew a short horizontal arc, contract the lines, then planted the banner vertical, take the high ground, and brought it down hard toward the southeast, the circular cave that sat above the battlefield. Bone Tree, fighting amid the shacks, saw the signal first. He drove his hammer into a clan rat's chest, black blood spattering his face, and roared, "Follow me. Seize the stone shacks by the temple. Fall behind and you won't get mushroom wine tonight." The orcs tightened their formation, abandoning scattered skirmishing to cleave through blocking slave rats and push toward the stone shacks. Built of hard rock with narrow windows, the shacks were easily defended and hard to take. An orc who reached a doorway was struck in the eye by a poisoned dart from within and fell screaming, but the others stepped over him and poured inside. Soon the shacks echoed with Skaven wails and the steady clang of weapons. Scarface, take your archers to the circular cave on the southeast. Lay down arrow rain. Don't let the Skaven get to those shacks. Stone shouted to the goblin beside him. Scarface led 200 goblin archers to the cave mouth. It funneled in like a throat, and from there the slave rat's charge route was clear. The goblins loosed a volley that felled whole swaths of the lead rats. Arrow shafts jutted from carcasses like a grotesque forest. Yet the slave rats did not break. Others stepped and ran across the piled bodies, using them as shields, and the arrow storm's effect lessened. Goblin spearmen, guard those 3 tunnels. Stone pointed to 3 branching cave entrances. No ambushes, no reinforcements from behind. Over 300 goblin spearmen split into 3 ranks, bristling with spear tips like 3 steel gates. A clan rat, who poked his head out for a flank, was skewered through the chest. Black blood ran down the spear. Still the Skaven surged, clinging to shafts and trying to climb over. The goblins shoved and jabbed, piling Skaven corpses until half the tunnel mouths were blocked. Ironclaw's banner moved again, tracing a semicircle to the west, Glenn's signal. His eyes lit. He wiped blood from his face and shouted to the orc boys at his side, "Follow me. We'll circle the west and hit them from behind." They moved along a narrow passage piled with discarded ore and Skaven skeletons, stepping on brittle bone that cracked beneath their boots. The western route emptied out behind the slave rat charge. Glenn smashed through a wooden barricade, surprising the clan rats who were overseeing the attack. One tried to raise a dagger and was split in half. Black blood freckled Glenn's face. Under the banner, positions steadied, but brutality did not relent. A goblin archer who had just felled a clan rat was struck by a falling rock from above and died instantly. An orc boys took a poisoned dart for a goblin, his body seizing as the venom spread, his breath stuttering away. Some slave rats, even dying, clung and bit deep enough to rupture an artery. They died joined to a green skin. Stone watched the slaughter with a leaden heart. He glanced at the mechanical pocket watch in his hand, 2 hours since entering the cave. Skarsnik's squighoppers and Kez's deathcrawler had not appeared. Squighoppers could leap unseen through broken terrain. The deathcrawler could climb and flank on sheer rock. If either arrived, they could rip open the Skaven lines. Not to mention Big Smart still had 500 reserves and a secret weapon. Must hold on. Stone muttered, fingers digging into the haft of his short axe. Now was no time to slack. He would wait for reinforcements to avenge the fallen and to crush the vile Skaven completely. The cave's steady drip faded into the battlefield's chaos, the greenskins' roars, the Skaven's screams, the clash of steel, the dying's wails. It wove a bloody, desperate song. From a hidden passage came a rapid clatter of footsteps, the approaching squighoppers. Skarsnik's reinforcements were finally about to join this blood-soaked fight. 137, Cave Rat Man Battle 5. In the wooden hut area on the east side of the cavern, the greenskins who were locked in combat with the clan rats suddenly heard a rapid thump-thump, the muffled pounding of squig hooves on stone, mixed with goblin cries coming fast from a side passage. Before the clan rats could react, some 300 figures burst from a side alley. Goblin riders, clad in thick tanned leather and armed with long spears or lances, sat astride cavalry squigs plated with thin iron. Like a green arrow, they crashed into the clan rats' ranks. "Charge! Trample these rat pups!" The squig hoppers roared. The cavalry squigs pushed off with powerful hind legs, leaping and landing among the ratmen. Iron plates smashed bones, spears punched through chests, and the squigs' jaws tore into throats, splashing black-red blood and guts across the cracked floor. One clan rat only just raised his dagger before a squig's hoof crashed down on his chest. Ribs snapped with a crisp crack. He shrieked and was flattened like a rag doll, entrails and blood pouring from his mouth. The clan rat's stubborn defense dissolved. Those who could fled, but dozens of smaller squigs, squig hounds, darted from the passage with noses to the ground, chasing and biting at the routed ratmen like hunting dogs. One squig clamped down on a fleeing soldier's calf, yanking him down and leaving a dragged trail of blood. Skarsnik rode out from the passage atop a giant all-black squig. He wore leather armor bristling with bone spikes, had a blade of grass between his teeth, and gripped a spear set with squig fangs. He sniffed, scowled, and complained. "Damn it, this rat nest stinks worse than my squig pen. No wonder the lads don't want to go underground." Then, seeing the greenskins fighting hard, he raised his spear and shouted to the riders behind him, "Get your spirits up. Whoever kills the most ratmen gets a roasted squig. Charge!" He slapped his squig's head, and the beast roared, surging toward the temple. But before they could get far, dozens of night goblins suddenly appeared from holes high in the rock, hurling stone slings. Their sunken eyes glittered from the ledges as they loosed volleys packed with sharp rock shards and rusty metal. One goblin rider failed to dodge. A stone shard struck his helmet, cracking it, and blood ran down his cheek as he tumbled off the squig. Before he could rise, 3 night goblins pounced. Daggers stabbed his chest, abdomen, and throat, and black blood spurted in a fountain. He stopped breathing. "Shields up!" Skarsnik barked. The squig hoppers raised round wooden shields. Stone shards pinged and thudded off the boards, numbing the arms of the slingers. A few slow goblins were struck in the head by flying rock and dropped where they stood, quickly surrounded and cut down by the night goblins. One night goblin even looped his sling around a goblin's neck and yanked. A sickening crack answered, and the goblin's head slumped to one side. Skarsnik roared, slapped his mount, and the squig leaped up to the ledge. The great beast's claws bit into the rock like a gecko, and Skarsnik thrust his spear at the slingers. One night goblin took a spear through the shoulder, shrieking as he tumbled from the ledge into the slave rat swarm below and was instantly trampled into a bloody pulp. The temple gate at the cavern's center then burst open with a thunderous rumble. Yuka charged out astride a giant carrion rat the size of a small elephant, his son close behind. 200 storm vermin in black iron heavy armor poured out with them, Jia clan elite, their halberds and heavy blades set with warpstone and strange runes that glowed an eerie green in the firelight. "Greenskin scum, how dare you invade my territory? Today you die!" Yuka shrieked, brandishing a warpstone scepter. A wave of black energy blasted toward the bone tree, who was leading the orc big guys in clearing clan rats from around the temple. The bone tree raised his warhammer to block. The energy struck the haft and black corrosive marks spread. The warhammer's wooden handle snapped with a crack. An orc big guy grazed by the blast felt his arm rot away, flesh festering and bone whitening. He screamed and tried to hack his arm off, but a storm vermin drove a halberd through his chest. With a single powerful flick, the storm vermin hoisted the corpse and splattered black blood onto the slave rats below, who went into a feeding frenzy. Shito, watching from high ground, realized the storm vermin's armor and weapons were studded with warpstone, an unstable crystal whose corrupting energy ate away at living flesh. Oddly, he also noticed that greenskins cut by warpstone bled and yet did not rot or go insane. Instead, they went even more berserk with pain. The bone tree roared, flung aside the broken haft of his warhammer, drew 2 short axes from his belt, and charged the storm vermin. One halberd cleaved his shoulder, ripping leather and exposing bone, but the bone tree swung back and shattered an opponent's helm, splitting his head clean off. Black blood and brain matter spattered his face. Just then, a rustling came from the eastern cave entrance. Kes had arrived with 800 death crawlers. Night goblins in black burlap cloaks rode massive spiders, weaving along the steep walls with short bows and curved scimitars. One death crawler circled behind a storm vermin and thrust at a gap in the armor, but the blow glanced harmlessly off warpstone plating. The storm vermin turned and hacked at the spider's leg. The limb was severed and green ichor spouted. The spider screamed and threw the night goblins, but before they could recover, 2 storm vermin dropped on them, heavy blades shearing them into 3 pieces. Their innards were scattered for the slave rats to fight over. The battle grew more brutal. Little Piggy, the 5-meter Arachnari giant spider, joined the fight. Its ink-black carapace could take the storm vermin's strikes, but a heavy halberd found its belly and pierced deep. Green fluid dripped from the blade. Little Piggy shrieked, stamped down, and crushed the storm vermin into a bloody pulp, but it kept bleeding from the abdominal wound, and its movements began to slow. Glenn rode on Little Piggy's back, swinging a great axe that split Storm Vermin armor, though a blade caught him across the thigh and blood ran down his leg. Still he clung to the spider's fur, refusing to fall. Shito watched the greenskins and Ratman fall and fight below, and the sight set a furnace in his chest. Skarsnik and Kez had reinforced them. The clan rat's main force was tied up. Victory was in reach. He could not hold back any longer. He set Furball, resting in his arms, onto his shoulder and smoothed the creature's fur. "Let's go," he said. Furball gave an excited growl. His body swelled, and he surged forward, bearing Shito toward the fray. Shito drew his short axe, fixed his eyes on Yuka, stubborn, defiant, and his face was hard with killing intent. This war with the Jia clan would end in blood. The Jia clan never relied on strange creations. They fought the ancient, bloody way. Warpstone, the chaotic crystal other clans used to mutate monsters, wasn't used to spawn abominations here. They crushed it and mixed it into the cores of their armor and weapons. Heavy black iron took on a faint green glow. The edges of swords and halberds were inlaid with tiny specks of warpstone. Every chop and hack carried a cold, chaotic gleam. It never corroded the greenskins, which Yuka had always found infuriating and incomprehensible, but he accepted it and bled with it the same as any other tool of war. A sudden rustling came from the cave above the battlefield. 100 night goblins poured out of the rock crevices like water. Clinging to the stone upside down with all four limbs, they swung their slings in frenzy. Gravel-packed stones, wrapped with rusty iron, screamed through the air toward the greenskins below. One goblin spearman was too slow to dodge. A stone struck his helmet, denting it instantly. Black blood seeped through the seam and he fell, torn apart by charging slave rats. An orc boy took a stone in the eye, bellowed, and wildly swung his great axe, accidentally cutting at his own comrades. "Boys, deal with these wall crawlers." Kez roared from the rock face, and a pack of death crawlers answered. Riding giant spiders and wrapped in burlap, they moved like ghosts up the sheer stone, some climbing vertically, others springing from ledge to ledge, while scimitars and shortbows found their marks with deadly precision. One death crawler leapt at an upside-down night goblin, scimitar flashing. The goblin split in half, black blood splattering onto the floor below. Another fired an arrow, pinning a goblin to the wall until he stopped struggling. These were experts of vertical combat. There, in short order, the 100 night goblins were cut down. The cliff face was a grotesque tapestry of green hide, spider silk, and black and red blood. On the field below, Stone patted the head of his mount, Furball, while Iron Claw, the standard bearer, and a dozen huge orc big guys, Stone's personal guards, fell into step behind him. These were the Blackrock tribe's finest, each over 2 meters tall, muscles like carved stone, encased in quenched iron armor inlaid with squig tusks, wielding master-forged great axes and warhammers. They had eaten the tribe's best meat and drank the strongest mushroom wine. They had broken the toughest bones and survived the fiercest fights. Now they followed Stone in deadly silence, eyes bright with bloodlust. "Charge!" Stone commanded. Furball roared, swelling to 3 meters tall. He slammed his hooves down and charged through the battlefield like a runaway warhammer. Slave rats in his path were smashed to paste. Others were hurled into the rock face with sick snapping of bone. 3 enormous carrion rats, war beasts trained by Yuka, armored crudely in iron, rushed in from the flank to block them. A cold light flickered in Stone's eyes. The whack inside him surged, turning pale green as it wrapped Furball. "Whack! Charge!" he screamed, slapping the beast's neck. Furball accelerated, a shower of rock shards trailing in his wake, and slammed into the carrion rats like green lightning. The first rat had barely opened its mouth when Furball's head smashed into it. Its body flew back and crashed into a temple pillar, brains splattering. The second had its armor dented and ribs shattered. It convulsed on the ground. The third tried to flank, but Furball's tail struck true. Its body split in two, black blood spattering across Stone's armor. Stone's eyes swept the field. Bone Tree, a Skaven commander in warpstone-forged heavy plate, was locked in brutal combat with orc big guys and storm vermin. The warpstone armor was impressively tough. Bone Tree's short axe only left shallow marks. For a moment, the fight looked evenly poised. Stone's lips curled. He threaded his fingers into a hand sign. The whack energy inside him shifted into a peculiar sorcery, Death Itch. A pale green mist rolled through the storm vermin lines. These elite Skaven, supposedly fearless, shuddered as a maddening itch crawled under their skin like 1,000 tiny insects. One ripped his helmet off and clawed at his face until his nails tore his flesh. Another stripped his upper armor and writhed on the ground, scratching until his whole body was a mass of wounds. Some even gouged out their own eyes in frantic agony. Devoid of their protective plate, they were easy prey. Bone Tree roared and surged forward. Orc big guys cleaved them open and smashed their skulls. The greenskins shattered the storm vermin formation and pushed on toward the temple. Clan rats and slave rats between the lines were swept aside like driftwood. Stone's target had always been one-man Yuka. Riding Furball, he charged straight for the Jia clan leader who stood in the center of the battlefield. Yuka rode a giant carrion rat, directing the defense. From his side, a younger warrior, his son, also named Yuka, rode a medium carrion rat. The elder Yuka's voice cut across the din. "Yuka, with me! Kill this greenskin scum!" The son's eyes were red with rage. The wound from Bone Tree's axe still streaked black across his shoulder. But he lifted his warpstone-inlaid heavy sword and dove into position to form a pincer with his father. Stone laughed with grim pleasure and drew his short axe. Furball reared toward the younger Yuka. The boy slapped his mount, and it sidestepped. The son's heavy sword, glinting with cold green light, slashed for Stone's flank, while his halberd thrust from the other side, the warpstone tip promising death. Father and son moved with the kind of practiced coordination only years of fighting together could forge. Low, swift cuts from the sword, high, brutal thrusts from the halberd. Stone, riding Furball, parried and dodged, but the blows came relentless. His short axe rang against the heavy sword. Sparks scattered, pain jolted through his arm. The halberd's tip scored a deep gouge in his armor. Black warpstone mist hissed off the wound, but did no lasting harm. Yuka's attacks came faster, a rain of steel. Stone felt his arms grow heavy. He could not hold forever. His eyes flicked to the shadows and found several vile stalkers, black-leathered goblins, creeping among corpses and rock ledges. They saw him glance and understood. Stone made a plan. He suddenly exposed his left flank, an invitation. The younger Yuka's face lit with triumph, and he swung his heavy sword at Stone's shoulder. The blade almost connected when Stone slapped Furball. The beast leapt. Stone's axe caught the halberd's shaft, and with a sick crack split it clean in two. Yuka froze. Furball's hoof crushed the younger Yuka's carrion rat. The beast screamed and fell, flinging the rider to the ground. The boy's sword missed. Momentum carried him forward. Two vile stalkers leapt from a corpse heap and drove poisoned daggers into his exposed lower back, a gap in his armor. Black blood oozed along the blades as venom spread through him. He stiffened, his sword clattered from numb fingers. "Yuka!" the elder cursed, scrambling to his feet. Another vile stalker lunged, nicking a thigh. The wound slowed him. Stone seized his chance. He slid from Furball, and the short axe whistled. It sliced across the boy's throat with a wet squelch. Blood gushed, and the head tumbled free, eyes still wide with shock and unwillingness. Stone turned to the elder Yuka. The old clan leader's face was a mask of fury and despair. He raised his warpstone scepter. Green light flared wildly over him. He meant to detonate the warpstone within and take Stone with him. "Greenskin scum! If I die, I'll drag you down with me," he howled. Stone sneered and gave him no mercy. Furball reared and stamped both hooves onto Yuka's chest, pinning him. Yuka coughed black blood, his body convulsed, the light in his scepter guttering. Stone strode forward, pressed his short axe to the old man's throat, and spoke coldly. "Your clan is finished. Your son is dead. Next life, don't provoke greenskins." He brought the axe down. Yuka's head rolled, eyes staring toward the temple that had once been his symbol of power, now about to fall into green hands. Stone picked up the warpstone scepter, weighed it in his hand, then casually tossed it to Ironclaw. "Brothers," he barked, "full assault on the temple. Loot the food and valuables. Let not a single Skaven escape." Ironclaw raised the scepter and roared in answer. The greenskins surged, "Whack!" echoing as they crashed toward the temple in a living tide. The battle's outcome was decided in that instant. The rule of the Jia clan had collapsed. The heads of the clan leader and Yuka tumbled across the stone slabs. black blood seeping into the cracks and soaking the bone steps in front of the temple. Shito had expected that with the death of the Skaven's supreme leader and his heir, this already starved, battle-worn clan would collapse like every other enemy the Greenskins had crushed. Scatter and run, easy pickings for the slaughter. Reality hit him in the face. The clan rats that had been fleeing suddenly stopped. The slave rats no longer bolted blindly. They surged toward the temple like a tide pulled by an invisible hand. Using the wooden houses, stone buildings, and narrow alleys that crowded the temple, they formed makeshift defensive lines. Some scrambled onto roofs, some burrowed into cellars, others crouched in corners and launched frantic counterattacks with short knives, long spears, or even their teeth. When the Greenskins charged, Skaven leapt from rafters and gutters, dragging enemies down in mutual destruction. "Damn it! Why aren't these rats running?" Glenn roared as he split a clan rat's skull with his axe, black ichor splattering his face. The orc boys around him were bewildered. By Greenskin logic, the troops should have scattered once the leaders died. Instead, the Skaven fought harder than ever. Every building and alley turned into a last stand. Every breach was filled almost instantly. Stones rained down from rooftops, and coordinated charges created crossfires that punished anyone who pushed too far. Shitu, mounted on Furball and standing on high ground, frowned. This wasn't mindless panic. Someone was commanding them. His gaze swept the temple and stopped on the high platform above the main entrance. There, unlike the usual gray-black fur of common Skaven, a clump of strange green fuzz ringed the leader's head like moss corrupted by chaos. He wore black iron plate superior to ordinary clan rats. 2 poisoned short blades hung at his waist, and he gripped a command baton studded with bits of warpstone. He shrieked orders, constantly adjusting the defenses. "That's Hiss," a trembling slave rat behind Shito whispered through tears. "Clan leader's vanguard officer. He's the cruelest and smartest. Used to bully us all the time. I didn't think he'd still be alive." Shito narrowed his eyes. Hiss looked at the bodies of the clan leader and Yuka with no grief, only a sharp, hungry joy. It was plain to see he had waited for this moment. With the old leaders dead, the whole clan's remaining power would fall to whoever held the temple. If Hiss could hold out and get those great weapons running, he could smash the greenskin ring and seize command. "Dream on," Shito muttered. Hiss felt the same certainty. Clan leader had been cautious and cowardly, Yuka reckless and inept. They should have been replaced by someone who knew how to win. Now the clan's fate was in his paws. He tightened his grip on his baton and pointed at the advancing greenskins. "Hold the line. Any of you who run will be thrown to the carrion rats," he screamed. "Priests, bless the brethren with bloodlust. Let the greenskins see the horned rat's followers never tire." A side door to the temple ground opened, and a dozen Skaven priests in black robes poured out. Staves carved with weird runes in hand, they danced a twisted ritual and intoned their incantations. Pale violet energy pulsed from them and washed over the Skaven. Those who had been exhausted opened bloodshot eyes. Their muscles swelled, and they went into a berserk frenzy, fighting on as if they felt no pain. "Damn it! Why did these rats suddenly get so damn strong?" An orc boy, who'd been toppled by one of the bloodlusted Skaven, cursed. He killed his attacker with a backhand blow, but lost a chunk of flesh from his arm when the rat bit down, teeth flashing. Shitu watched and understood. The priest's blessing didn't just increase strength, it steadied morale on the verge of collapse. The jumble of houses around the temple had become a fortress. Dense wooden and stone buildings linked together, alleys only wide enough for 2 abreast. Greenskin numbers and individual power were useless. Every step forward cost dearly. Worse, a low stone wall ringed the temple. Waist high, it gave Skaven cover to fire and fling missiles, forcing anyone who charged across to expose themselves to arrows and thrown stones. "We can't keep doing this. Casualties are too high," Bone Tree said from Little Piggy's back. His armor scored, and a Skaven poison arrow embedded in his shoulder. "We've charged 3 times and haven't broken them. There are too many rats behind that wall." She too felt the urgency. He hadn't expected Hiss to hold so well, nor that the Skaven had priests able to bless fighters. Then a roar rolled over the battlefield as fresh greenskins poured in from the eastern approach. Reinforcements. Big Smart had arrived. Boss, I'm here, Big Smart called, riding a massive war spider, a smug grin splitting his rotten teeth. Behind him came over 500 fresh greenskins, orc boys, goblin spearmen, and a clutch of big uns wielding cleavers and axes, all bristling with energy. She too brightened and spurred Furball forward. You finally made it. Where's my treasure? Big Smart clapped. A pair of orcs hauled forward a bulky machine, oak and black iron, a heavy iron base, a huge launching trough lined with thick hides, thick springs at the rear, and a squig's snarling face carved on the top. Boss, behold, the Death Dive catapult, Big Smart announced proudly. Big Valley, the Goblin Tech, helped design it after we nicked a cannon from the Black Cloth Brotherhood, used a bit of orc cunning to get it done. It can fling goblins, and they blow up on impact, take out a whole cluster. Shito's eyes flashed. He patted the catapult. Good. Fire it. It's ready, Big Smart barked. A goblin was shoved forward, wild-eyed, face-painted, clutching a short knife wired to explosives. He howled like a mad thing, hopping into the trough. A few orcs cranked the levers, the springs groaned tight. Aim for the temple entrance. Fire, Shito shouted. The orcs let go. The springs snapped back and hurled the goblin in a wild arc. He screamed all the way and struck the stone entrance like a green cannonball. Boom, the explosives detonated on impact. The shockwave blew out part of the stone wall, spitting masonry and dust into the air. Dozens of clan rats at the gate were shredded, black blood and organs splattering the doorway. Survivors were stunned, convulsing on the ground. Hiss on the high platform stared at the ruined wall and the bodies, his smugness curdling into panic. He had never imagined the greenskins would field such a weapon. Quick, hurry and debug it. Get that weapon ready. Hiss shrieked into the temple, his voice thin with fear. If you wait any longer, it will be too late. From deep within the temple came the clank and whir of gears and metal. Hiss's last hope lay hidden there. 10 great weapons he had bought from the Scryer clan, trump cards he'd spent half a year's worth of grain and slaves to secure. If they were fully debugged, he could tear open the greenskin cordon, maybe even counterattack, and slaughter them. Shito smiled at the blasted gap and urged Furball forward. Brothers, charge! Smash that rat nest, take their food, kill all the Skaven! Whee! Whee! The greenskins answered like a thunderclap. Glenn led the orc boys through the breach, Bone Tree followed on Little Piggy, and Deathcrawler units began to scale the rock face to storm the temple from the flanks. Inside, the 10 mysterious weapons rattled as their gearing grew frantic. Hiss clenched his command baton and fixed his eyes on the oncoming tide. He had only one thought: hold out until those weapons were ready. 140. Crypt Rat Man Battle 8. The thunder of the Deathcrawler catapults was deafening in the underground cavern. The oak and black iron frames creaked as their springs were drawn back, each launch punctuated by the frenzied shrieks of the suicide goblins. Drugged and drunk on tribal glory, the goblins clutched bundles of explosives traded by the dwarves, black squares wrapped in oilcloth, packed with saltpeter and sulfur, capable of bringing down thick stone. Fire! Blast those rats to kingdom come! Big Smart bellowed by the catapult, wrench raised, roaring orders at the orc boys running it. The orc boys let go of the joystick and the springs released. A goblin flew up like a green cannonball, an explosive bundle flapping in his arms with a glowing fuse. For the Blackrock tribe! Wah! He screamed. He slammed into the wooden huts on the temple's west side. Boom. The blast swallowed the whole area. Beams and thatch were torn apart, rock and splinters hurled in every direction. Black and red Skaven bodies flew like torn kites and smashed against distant stone, leaving gruesome stains. The shockwave ruptured eardrums. Slave rats at the epicenter were shredded, their black gore spattering the walls. Powder smoke and the stench of blood choked the air. That was only the beginning. Deathcrawler after Deathcrawler launched its payloads, suicide goblins raining down on the Skaven defenses. Some landed in narrow alleys and collapsed tunnels blocked retreat. Some struck gaps and pulverized clan rats trying to mend the walls. Others smashed into stone pillars, toppling them and crushing Skaven priests sheltering below. The explosions inflicted terrible casualties and crushed morale. Bloodlust alone could not hold the line. Clan rats dropped weapons and fled into tunnels, only to be cut down by Hiss's execution squad. Slave rats cowered, trembling. Charge! Into the temple. Seize the food. Glenn yelled. He swung his great axe and led the surge through a breached wall. The greenskins poured in like a flooded dam. Orc boys swung axes and warhammers, cutting down survivors. Goblin spearmen locked their shields and pushed the enemy toward the main gate. Death crawlers scrambled up walls on giant spiders and rained arrows on hiding Skaven. Building after building fell to the invaders, and the Skaven defensive line steadily retreated to the temple's mouth. One more push, and the Jia clan's last resistance would be smashed. Stone, mounted on Furball, rode at the rear. He watched the gate draw nearer with a victorious smile, already imagining looting Warpstone, food, and valuables and wiping the clan from the underground. Then the temple gate burst open. Hiss strode out, flanked by a dozen storm vermin in heavy armor. In their hands, a device of black iron, laced with cooling vents, 6 barrels in the muzzle, a magazine at its base, etched with warped runes, the clan's ultimate killing machine, a rattling gun. Worse, 9 more storm vermin followed, each armed with its own rattling, and each paired with a clan rat feeding belts of warpstone rounds. Their cold, feverish eyes tracked the greenskins. "Greenskin filth, taste my power!" Hiss snarled, face twisted in a manic grin. He pulled the trigger, and the 6 barrels began to spin with a terrible whir. Warpstone bullets, sickly green and humming with energy, spat from the muzzles in a dense, scorching spray. The greenskins were unprepared. The leading orc boys were riddled instantly, whole holes blown through heavy armor, black blood steaming as they collapsed without a scream. A goblin spearman tried to brace with his spear. A volley shattered his arm, then tore his chest apart. The charge collapsed as front ranks fell, and those behind tripped over bodies into the hail. Bone Tree, struck in the shoulder by a round, tumbled to the ground as blood blurred his vision, but he roared while bleeding and urged others to take cover. Greenskins dropped behind stones and inside ruined huts as bullets pinged off rock, sent wood splinters scattering, or rang harshly against armor before tearing flesh. Despair rolled across the battlefield. Stone, atop Furball, stared in disbelief at the spinning, glowing guns. How had these Skaven, creatures of claws and warpstone melee, gotten such weapons? Their fire was deadlier than any human musket. He watched his brothers, the Blackrock tribe's best, cut down by a strange technology, and felt fury, grief, and helplessness. Hiss, blinded by triumph, would not let the trigger go. The barrels glowed red from the continuous firing. Spent casings clinked and piled at his feet. He shrieked, "Kill! Kill you all! I am clan leader. I am the overlord of the Undercroft." The surrounding storm vermin matched his zeal. Their rattling barrage never let up. The ground before the gate became a forbidden zone. The greenskins lay pinned dozens of paces away, forced to watch comrades bleed out. Big Smart crouched behind a rock, shaken. His death crawlers were powerful but useless when the muzzle of a gun could slice him open. "Boss, what now? That thing's too strong," he called toward Stone. Stone's jaw clenched. They couldn't take this. If they stayed under that fire, all his brothers would be slaughtered. He scanned the battlefield for a way through. Bone Tree prone, Glen behind buildings, catapults still working. A bold idea formed. "Big Smart," Stone barked. "Keep firing the catapults. Aim for those rattling guns. Even if you don't destroy them, break their fire." "But," Big Smart began, "the catapults weren't accurate and could hit their own people. Stop whining. Do it now." Stone cut him off. Big Smart obeyed. He ordered the orc crew, "Aim at the rattling positions. Fire." The crew adjusted angles and loaded. A suicide goblin with an even larger bundle flung himself into the catapult, howling, "For the mushroom wine! Whack!" The release sent him rocketing through the air toward the rattling line. Hiss spun to track the flying goblin and leveled his gun. Bullets stitched the green silhouette, tearing him apart, but the goblin clung to his charge and lunged on. Boom. The blast centered on the rattling position. A storm vermin was blown apart. His rattling was hurled away, its barrels twisted and ruined. Hiss was shoved back by the concussion, black blood leaking from his mouth. His mania curdled into rage. "Damn greenskins! I'll kill you all!" He tried to rally his guns to sweep again, but Bone Tree, still bleeding, bellowed from the ground. "Brothers, now! Charge!" Ignoring every wound, Bone Tree sprang up, brandished his short axe, and ran for the gate. Glen and a handful of orc boys burst from behind a building toward the other rattlings. Their courage spread. Despite the ongoing hail, the greenskins surged with grim determination. Stone patted Furball's neck. "Furball, charge!" he shouted. The great beast answered with a roar and launched itself like a green bolt. Stone drew his short axe. The whack energy thrummed through him, raw and ready. If they could reach those rattling guns, they could break the stream of death. The battle at the temple gate flared once more, closer and bloodier than before.